Good evening. I assume we're all set, David, on the recording? Thank you. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to report that we had a closed session before this, and we took action on the release of employee 1425, and the vote to approve the separation agreement was 4-0. We also do have an emergency
I'm sorry. Do we have a motion and a second? Did we have a?
We did that. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
motion and I second it.
Thank you. So before we approve the agenda, we actually do have emergency modification that Andy will explain.
Try to explain. So unfortunately, we did have a bit of a technical issue with the electronic version of the agenda that was posted Friday night. Brown Act requires that any public meeting agenda for a regular meeting must be posted within 72 hours prior to the meeting. We post our agendas physically in hard copy form immediately outside the superintendent's wing of the district office. That was done Friday night. This board received the full packet, including the agenda. And actually, we set a record for 308 pages, the largest agenda packet we've had. Unfortunately, when we actually created the electronic version of this document, the 5 pages of the agenda itself were left out of the 308-page attachment. So we posted it to our website Friday night, as well as sent it out to those who had requested a copy. We realized the error Monday morning, immediately sent out a full agenda packet to those who have, again, been on our email list requesting the copy. We conferred with our counsel. They've told us that in all likelihood we're fine because it was a technical error, that the remedy there is no remedy for the issue. However, we are a district that wants to always be above board and make sure that, when we do make a mistake, that we state it, and that in abundance of caution, we've decided to actually hold a special board meeting immediately to follow this regular board meeting tonight, where we'll be taking action on those items which require action. For special board meetings, you only are required to give 24 hours notice, and so last night we actually provide, again, to the same group of recipients to our agenda as well as on our website, we provide the special agenda, which there's no distinction, no variance from the regular meeting, except for it's only those action items, and so we'll be taking action on those items in the second special meeting. So again, the actual change to this agenda for the general meeting is simply changing all items that are action items to now be discussion items for the actual general meeting.
Okay, so 2.2, approval of the agenda. We actually can take an action on that. So I'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Okay, so actually all I'm asking about for 3.1 is, are there any questions, or was there any errors found in the meeting minutes from the September 5th meeting? Okay, so we will vote on that in the special meeting later. We do, our student rep looks like she's not here yet, so we'll come back to that if she comes up. We are public comments. I do have 2 forms. Michael Haley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Haley. I live here in Ojai. I came to talk about the short-term rental issue because I feel that it's a very relevant issue to the school board. And what I want to ask you to do is consider making a comment to the Ventura County Planning Commission about it. The Ventura County Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors met over this for like 2 years. The Planning Commission is taking it up either next month or maybe in December, and they're going to hold a number of hearings. And the thing about it is vacation rentals in Ojai, there's hundreds of them. Many of them are owned by investors that are from outside of town. Some of them are owned by investors that live in Ojai. And every one of those houses that is used as a hotel is a place that a family can't live. And I believe that it's having a significant impact on school attendance and enrollment in Ojai, which is a big issue, and it's hurting the schools financially. Obviously, there's a lot of issues related to declining attendance. That's maybe not even the most important one, but it's one that we can control. It's one that we could do something about. So I'm just wading out here into an area. For all I know, it's not something that you can even do. But I just thought I would surface the issue. I know from my previous experiences with government, oftentimes other institutions, such as a school board or other government entities, are allowed to make comments to planning departments on planning issues. And I think this one is certainly relevant to the school board. So I just wanted to surface that tonight and hope that you might think about that. Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question, Michael?
Sure.
Is there a vote coming up? Is that why you're bringing
Oh
it to
yeah,
us
they're
now?
gonna enact a new ordinance, and it's contentious, it's controversial. I'm sure you've all heard about it.
Right.
But yeah, and the supervisors have given direction to the planning commission, and what they told them was they wanted them to get rid of the whole house and allow what they call home shares, which is when an owner who lives on the property just rents a room, which I would have less objection to. What's turned out, though, is that the investors don't do it. You make the law and they don't do it. We're having a tremendous problem with that in the city of Ojai right now. There's a woman here, some of you probably know her, Vicki Carlton Byrne, who's really tracks it all the time. And she's been doing that for a couple of years now. And she just told me, I just talked to her today on the phone, tried to get her to come over here and help me, but she said there were 16 new ones in the city of Ojai in the last 3 weeks, even though it's illegal. So it's one of those things that's very difficult to control, and the community has really going to have to push hard. So, and what happened is that, our opponents are all business people that have money. They hired lawyers. They made 90-page memos, legal memos, and it was mostly just a bunch of ragtag locals like myself who went in, and they really outgunned us. And that's why we need some substantial professional, school board or other institutional people here to come and support us. Steve Bennett has told us that it's going to be a tough ride, and we're going to have to really push hard, or we're not going to win. So they could successfully, head this in the other direction from what the supervisors have said. So,
A little context, just to be clear. In the city of Ojai, it's illegal, but with apparent violations. So what we're talking about, what he's talking about, is Ventura generally. So effectively, the unincorporated areas of Ventura that are part of our school district would be affected by whatever decision Ventura County makes on that subject.
Yeah, and there's hundreds of them right now in the valley around the city.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. That's a lot of kids that could be living there, and there's plenty of families that will want to live in those homes. So you really do have a vested interest in this issue.
And the pending ordinances for whole house rentals.
The pending ordinance is for the whole thing about what are we going to do about vacation rentals. Are we going to tax them? How much? Are we going to allow them at all? If we allow them, under what circumstances? What are the rules? How many can you have on one street? The whole enchilada is what they're doing, and it's going to take a while. So you have time to, weigh in. But yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Brian Aiken.
Hello everyone, I'm Brian Akins. I'm an Oakview resident, also in the Ventura Unified School District by chance, just on the other side of the border. Also, as you know, I'm the Vice Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Last year when we contracted with the Provenience Group of San Ynez to provide the HPC with the Historical Resources Report for the Nordhoff Grammar School, I had been concerned with the lack of progress of the HPC receiving the report. I had been advised by, I believe, prior city staff that it was being impeded in part by lack of staffing of the Ojai Unified School District office during the late summer months. In my further irritation, earlier this year of still not receiving a report, I repeated that information in a city council meeting and most likely an HPC meeting as frustration with a lack of a report built. We then found out that it had been that it appeared to be prior staff that earlier this year was keeping an initial draft, which they had received in January, from being delivered to the HPC. That was my experience earlier this year. Since the beginning months of 2017 and working with former Superintendent Bankster, more recently Superintendent Cantwell, and through the year with Kathy Smith, my experience with the three has been of exemplary service, support, and cooperation, always. Superintendent Cantwell was nice enough to invite me to his office some months ago so he and I could exchange questions, answers, and added information over 2 meetings in 4 hours. We tried to do it in 1, but hey, that wasn't going to work, so lots of information to share. Although the HPC hearing did not go as he might have hoped, I do hope that I was able to provide insightful information. By the way, we haven't seen the historical resources report yet that we fully agreed with, so it's just what we get. My dear friend David Mason would take them home and spend nights going through and correcting them. So tonight I want to thank Superintendent Cantwell, Executive Assistant Kathy Smith for the great service you have provided me. I previously thanked Superintendent Bankster at a lunchtime roundtable, really round chairs, on the first Wednesday of the prior month at Libby Park. It was his last meeting that he was attending, my first. So thank you all for your support. As you may not know, I'm the Collections Committee Chair of the Ojai Valley Museum, amongst other volunteer duties. That means I get to see what fascinating things come into the museum for possible accession. This is the real reason I joined the museum board, not to be their treasurer, which is something I do for a job. Last Thursday, just hours before the HPC meeting, a report that a Master's of Science of Education candidate had done up on the history of Nordhoff Union School District was shared. The report by Russell Adolph Vogel, I don't know if this is a Vogel, a local Vogel, could be Kathy, was done in August 1963. And so when I see something like that cross my desk, I borrow it, I take it home, I scan it, I print a copy out, and for the museum, a copy for me. And I'd like to present this to Kathy because she's the keeper of all things historic, I believe. So this is 120-something pages that has lots of information talking about the schools all the way from Arnaz School all the way through the valley. And you can spend the rest of your life catching up who were the superintendents for the full rank. So again, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Teresa Dutter.
Could I just say, the first page of that is really politically incorrect, but it's a fantastic document.
Oh, yeah, they're Native Americans. Yeah, they're not treated so well in that 1963 too. So I apologize for that. I didn't write it.
I think you're fantastic, Brian.
Hi, Teresa Dutter here. I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Hanley's comments about the short-term rentals. That's something that was brought up initially when we were looking at our school closure possibility a couple years back. And the impact on our school district, but more comprehensively our whole community, is really significant with regards to the short-term rentals. I see it left and right. I hear stories, and I'd really like to make more affordable housing available for our community. So put my name down if ever you need somebody with my capacity to be able to help with the committee on that. I'm very interested. And then on a second note, I just want to say thank you to our district for the quick movement on addressing our tree issue. I know David Rogers has been coordinating that, and all my phone calls to him have been answered promptly and with information that helped me out on how I could coordinate safety on my campus. Chuck has been a wealth of knowledge throughout the years and has always tried to help me understand how best to handle the trees on whatever campus I was. So let's hear it for Ojai Unified. I'm really happy to be a part of it, so thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, 7.1.1, OUSD Classified Personnel Commissioner Appointment Process. Andy's going to tell us a little information on why we do this.
Sure.
Or how it matters, and then unless there's any questions, we'll just move on.
Exactly. So again, so just to refresh what we mentioned earlier, this is an example of an item that we'll discuss here during the regular meeting, but actually we'll hold off on taking a formal vote on it until our special meeting immediately following. So This item, though, is to set up the process to establish a public hearing in our November board meeting to be able to have the public hearing and ultimate vote on the nomination of the Personnel Commissioner representing the board on the Personnel Commission for the 3-year term. A little background on the merit system. We became a merit system district in 1969. There's currently about 100 of the 1,000 school districts are merit system districts in the state of California. However, because LA Unified happens to be one of them, when you look at a percent of staff in the state, it's actually far higher than just 10% of staff who are subject to the merit system. Really, the objective of the merit...
Last point again, I'm sorry. I didn't follow that.
100 out of 1,000 school districts participate or are
Right.
merit districts.
Right.
However, there's a disproportionate number of districts that are larger that participate, and so therefore, if it's not 10%
Got it.
of all staff in, you know.
So we're really an outlier because we're like one of the smallest,
Right,
and we're
exactly.
apparently among giants then.
Yeah,
Got
that's correct. So the idea of the civil service or merit system came about actually back in the 1800s when Grover Cleveland was assassinated. Because of the former system of the spoils system. So it used to be to the victor go the spoils, the political victor be able to get rid of all of the political appointees or the government workers and would be able to bring in his own chosen people. So that's what the merit system was created to protect against. The idea is that you have appropriate recruitment, selection, retention, promotion, and then ultimately, if necessary, separation from the government employer. So that's a little background on why we have the merit system. Again, we've had it now for nearly 50 years. The commission is made up of 3 commissioners. We, the board, have 1 vote of appointing 1 commissioner. CSEA has a second vote on the second commissioner is appointed by CSEA. And then the 3rd commissioner is actually appointed by the other 2 commissioners. So that's how we get an impartial body that helps oversee the classified service. Ultimately, they have about 100 pages of merit rules that they are responsible for overseeing and ensuring the district is complying with those rules. So again, that's the background, the reason that this item is coming to you. We've had a wonderful woman, Karen Phipps, who's served as the district representative, a personnel commissioner, for 3 terms. This would be her 4th, I believe. She's doing just a terrific job, lifelong career, school district employee, worked for us, worked down in Oxnard as well. And so it's my recommendation that she be nominated for another term at our November meeting. So again, today's agenda item is just to give the foundation to be able to hold that public hearing and ultimately take the vote in November.
So I'm not doing a public hearing, the public hearing is at the
Correct,
next
that'll be
meeting.
in November, exactly.
But the action
that
for.
little preamble was we'll wait. We'll reuse
You want me
that.
to we'll bring in the video for next one?
But at our special, the action is to, okay, approve upon, all right, never mind, sorry.
Andy, so one, are these people paid?
They are paid $25 per meeting.
That's an outrage. Joe. Why are what would the alternative be if we decided not to be a merit system anymore?
So first of all, a merit district can only be changed by the vote of the classified employees. The board, you do not have the ability to actually eliminate the merit system. It would be, again, coming from the classified service. I believe, Chuck, remind me on the timeline, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago that there was an initiative from district leadership to explore what it would look like to be a non-merit district, and I think it was pretty overwhelmingly stated by classified service that they were not interested at that time in losing the rights that come from being a merit district. Although there is a lot of duplication in rights that merit system protects from what the collective bargaining agreement protects as well. So 90% of school districts are not merit, and so in fact a majority of the districts in Ventura County are not. So obviously there are many protections both from statutory ed code as well as from collective bargaining that protects employees in those districts.
Were the ones that are overwhelmingly not merit anymore once merit probably, and at some point the
To my knowledge, no. I believe there have been very few districts that were merit that have eliminated the merit system. I think that my knowledge of it is the vast majority of districts that are not merit were never merit.
And what was the reasoning for looking at gone the other way. Do you know? Why our leadership here a few years back wanted to look at what it would look like?
I do not know. I'm sure Chuck has some thoughts. His perception.
Okay. Years ago, we had serious layoffs in the district. We were looking at 1.5 million in across the board. And so one of the things looking at the merit system, we've shared directors in the past with Santa Paula. We looked at that idea, but what ultimately happened is they cut about $100,000 out of that budget and rearranged the position, which Barbie Rice is now doing as a coordinator position, which it used to be the commissioner himself that was doing all that. So the district looked at that and reorganizing that and trying to save money as opposed to laying people off. Where else could we cut? And so we looked at that, and it seemed to have worked.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we used to have John Walker as our Director of Classified Human Resources as a full-time position, and he was actually funded by the Personnel Commission budget. So again, it's coming out of our general fund, but it's a separate line item for the commission. That was part of the arrangement that we arrived at a few years back, was having John Walker remain on only in a roughly 20% capacity to continue to service the merit system, the personnel commissioners, but that Barbie, who previously the position was a HR clerk, that was a district employee, not reporting to the commission, that would be slightly increased to the coordinator level, and Barbie stepped into that role at that time, and of course has done far more than we ever anticipated the coordinator being able to do. So that's a very good point as far as the history there of John Walker previously being the classified director level, but that change coming.
So John's not one of the commissioners?
John is not. No, he is
We get
staff.
those reports from him.
Exactly, he is staff, paid for by the district, but he is hired and serves at the pleasure of the commission.
Of the three commissioners?
Of the three commissioners.
Thanks.
And Grover Cleveland started this.
Well, his assassination is what
His
prompted it. Yeah,
It's all in the binder, guys.
No, it's not.
Because I can tell everyone is very interested in the Grover Cleveland connection. He was someone who totally disbanded and fired a bunch of government workers because he was elected president. And so it was, I believe, an upset U.S. Postal Service worker who'd lost his job because of Cleveland's actions that came and shot him.
Wow.
So that was why the
Postal back in the 1800s.
that was why the civil service program initiated, was to protect
I didn't
our
know that
presidents.
happened before the 70s.
Wow.
Postal
The
workers.
right.
Okay, we're going to move on to 7.3.1, and actually, 1, 2, and 3 together, possibly? Or we'll just open them to questions, if there's any, well, we'll just do 7.3.1, does anyone have questions about that contract? I believe it's just a renewal.
Yeah, so a reminder to the board and for information for those in the audience, the contracts in 7.31 through 3.3 are contracts that are signed each year annually by the board. They've been approved in the past. We're in, it's a multiple years of funding for CTE programs. And so neither of these are in their first year of funding, but it's two separate grants that we are participants with the county in.
Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, so we will approve those at our special, well, assuming we all vote. We might approve or we might reject, I guess you're right. I don't know. So 7.3.4, AB 288, dual enrollment. Obviously, we had quite a long agreement to read over, but Cheryl, were you gonna?
Yeah, I can give a little overview and explain what's in front of us here. So at our last board meeting, we heard from Tim Harrison, some others, just an overview for the audience, of course. Assembly Bill 288 is allowing us to enter into agreements with college districts in order to offer college and career access pathways. So we would have courses that are considered dual enrollment courses. They'd be referred to as CCAP courses. So what that means for one of our high school students, for example, is if they're in a CCAP course, they're getting credit for the high school as well as for the college. In the agreement that you're seeing today, the first part of the agreement is the general overview with some of the details that outline the partnership between the Community College District and our Ojai Unified. And then the addendum that comes next is some added details in regard to Nordhoff High School and Ventura College. There are a couple details there that are still pending or to be determined, so I'll kind of explain a little bit about what's going on with those two details. After that, you'll see some appendix. Appendix A is the list of college courses that may be offered under this agreement. So if we wanted to, look at that list to determine if we have some courses that would match up.
Is that basically all the courses that PC offers?
It's not all of them. It's not all of them.
Okay.
So they've determined a list that they feel are courses that could be offered. And then one of the goals of AB 288 is to help align the pathways for students. So we also have in the appendices the current pathways that we have at both Nordhoff and Chaparral. So the CTE courses. So a couple of the details that we're still working on, as you might recall in the last board meeting, we talked about how VCCD, like you're seeing there, has already entered into agreements with Santa Paula and Fillmore. In both those models, those pilot courses that are being offered currently, they're using the model where they actually have two instructors teaching the course. So there's the instructor that's the district instructor, and then the college is sending out an instructor. So the way that model works is if the college instructor would normally teach like 3 hours a week, they would come out and teach 3 hours. So for example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, teach side by side the high school teacher. We have been looking at possibly our pilot courses for this spring, if we can do so. We're looking at our current teachers that already have a master's degree in their subject area and therefore can be hired by Ventura College and teach the course themselves. The problem is that hasn't been done yet, so we're still working out those details. Because Santa Paula and Fillmore have chosen the other model, we can't really confer to them to see how they've decided to work those details out. But we do have, Tim Harrison has reached out to a colleague from Santa Barbara City College where they have about 100 courses. And so the things that need to be determined or that we still have pending for issues is how we would go about paying the teacher or compensating the teacher if they're hired by Ventura College. So they would still be our employee, they would still receive our payment for that section that they were already teaching. But because they're going to be doing a little extra work, aligning the course, there's some upfront prep work in addition to extra grading at the end of the semester, because they not only have to enter the grades that they would have to do for us, but also have to enter grades into the grading system for the college. So we are looking at how they've done it in other districts to offer a stipend for the teacher and hope to iron out those details by the November board meeting so we could talk about those agreements. In addition to that, they're in Santa Barbara, what they're doing is they also have a liaison on site. So for example, it might be one of our counselors that helps with the paperwork that has to be done. So when students register for the college course, there's going to be a person on site that has to help with that. So that person would also likely receive a stipend, and that would be something that we would want to discuss the amount of that. And then in addition, there is a possibility that in some of the other models that we are looked at or compared to in Santa Barbara, that a small portion, it looked like somewhere in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, was kicked back to actually the site in those cases as just extra funding for site discretionary uses for the principal and administrative staff. So again, those are the details that we'll figure out before the November board meeting.
Can you tell me, Cheryl, why you're looking at that model as opposed to the dual teaching model?
Well, eventually we'll offer both versions. So
Okay.
the idea is that we just want to get a pilot class out there so we can see how it's going, iron out the kinks, figure out how all that paperwork is going to go, all the accounting and things. And then the idea is that in the near future, in the years to come, that we would offer lots of courses. Santa Barbara City College, for example, has over 100 with their different feeder schools. So in the long run, we would eventually likely end up with both models on our campus.
Okay.
So I think the goal as far as the contract is just on the front end to lay out both pathways as options for us, whereas Santa Paula and Fillmore were able to, first of all, do this during the summer, and so they had a little different arrangement as far as class offerings. But also they were eager to get this going, and so they only have a contract that allows for one option. And so we really are looking at both options spelled out initially. But more importantly, what really impacts us, if we are going to try to do this as early as the spring, which is still on the table, it's still a possibility that we could have a class offered under this program for the spring. Nordhoff has very few semester-length classes, so we don't already have students who are going to be transferring out of, say, a film class that they're taking in the fall to another elective in the spring. So really what we have to do is find a way to tack on to a currently existing year-long program, year-long class. And frankly, I just, on October 17th, without the contract even being in place, I just am concerned with our ability to have a college class being able to overlap with a course that's already halfway through the school year and try to find the correct point at which the class should be starting for college credit. And, there's just a lot of challenges of having it start in the spring as opposed to if we had started before the school year began, it would have been very easy to maybe have done both options with a VC instructor partnering with one of ours. I think in order for us to have a spring class, we really have to look at our own staff being able to operate
So what we're
operate
talking
the program.
about really is like Spanish class where Miss Cornell already teaches at
Exactly.
BC,
It's going to be a lot
and
easier for her to
those
determine how
kids-
she can align it with both the college class, the college course, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 2A, whatever it might be, with the class that she's offering already. It's going to be much easier for her to align than to try to.
So would those kids then who are in her first semester class automatically be in that second semester class that would be the dual enrollment
Those
class?
are
Is
the
that
details
what
we need
we're
to work
looking
through, exactly.
But yes, I do, that would be
Mm-hmm. How, okay.
how it would work.
And a question about the stipend, is the concept that the college pays that or the we pay
Yeah.
it? Okay.
The college pays it directly to the teacher, and that's how they're hired by the
Right.
college.
And then maybe they pay our staff something as well.
Perhaps they pay something to the site or to the district.
Right.
So what is
as
the
additional
advantage
funds.
in the two teacher model?
Uh-huh,
They're paying a full teacher salary.
right.
And where it's just our teacher, they're basically getting our students, and they're getting money from the state for those students at a lower price.
Yeah, that's accurate. The amount that they pay our teachers and the amount of time that their teachers work, though, is far less than what our teachers work.
Right.
It's not an equal comparison.
But that's
What we
exactly
pay
what we're trying to work out
Yeah.
is, if we're going to be funding the staff member, then we want to make sure that, one, that there is something additional for that staff member, which we paid for as a stipend by the community college district. But we still believe that's likely that simply offering a stipend to someone who we're paying their full salary to would be less than what they'd be offering. And so that's one of the points that we're trying to negotiate right now is, okay, well, what additional funds then will actually come to the district, or potentially just directly to the site, but it'd still be via, district general fund dollars would flow to us from the community college district to compensate us for that expense that they're saving or offsetting.
When you use the term stipend, is that a term of art so that it would not impact the teacher's overall, STIRS and the other stuff in terms of their overall salary? It's something on top of that, but not part of the salary?
Exactly.
And thus wouldn't increase our contribution, right? Because we make a contribution to STIRS based on the total salary, which itself drives how much the contribution is, right? We make part of that contribution, don't we?
We do make the contribution. We don't know yet how the stipend would be structured, but there are stipends that some staff receive that do not have the district paying the STIRS or PERS contribution.
Could you speak just again, because someone explained it to me, but I want to be clear. How is it that we get our full ADA, but then Ventura is able to harvest their own equivalent, what's it called?
Apportionment.
Apportionment.
Right. So we have to have students in class about 240 minutes a day. So that's 4 periods essentially. So that's part of the details. They cannot take
8288.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's part of the details of how many, for example, how many courses, how many dual enrollment courses a student could take. So they have to be in 4 classes, for example, at Nordhoff, that are not CCAP, not dual enrollment. And then the maximum that they could take in a semester is 2 that would be CCAP or dual enrollment classes. And that's how we'd be able to stay in compliance and collect our ADA, and then they would be able to get apportionment for the other 2 courses.
So in those classes, only one party is collecting the money, and So the idea is we've collected all we can during the course of a 4-period day for the kid.
Right.
And then they've got 2 additional periods during which Ventura collects the money.
Right.
Got it.
Would
And
there ever be an opportunity to add a 7th period? That
I believe so.
would be a dual enrollment?
Yeah.
That's certainly a possibility as well.
Yeah.
So just to, again, not to suggest we ever would want to do this, but at the high school level, we only actually need to be providing 4 periods of class, 4 sections to receive the ADA. So the fact that we offer the 6 is because we have curriculum requirements, we have graduation requirements. But as far as from a funding perspective, we meet our requirements and we get paid from the 4 sections, which is why there are students who are able to have 1 or even 2 free periods during the day while we still collect. We don't lose revenue when a senior only has a 4 section schedule. So that's why this works, is that we always, when we're offering 6 sections, are only being funded for 4 of those.
But there's quite a bit of talk about the 15 credits. There's no way to get 15 credits from
There are when you add summer. So he talked about perhaps doing some summer courses. So you could get 6 the first semester, 6 the second semester. That's 12, and potentially if you took another course in summertime, you could get 15.
So how is it, because when I took my son to some college visits, there were students in the audience that said, I'm going to graduate from high school with my AA.
Mm-hmm.
That's 30 credits, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, or I
Actually,
think
no,
that's
I
I think
take
that's
back.
more likely
60.
I think that's more
Yeah.
likely the scenario like El Camino currently has with VC, and Moore Park College has the high school at the Moore Park College, where students are able to be through a special arrangement that's separate from AB 288, actually predates AB 288, where they're able to participate in high school classes while also fully participate on the college campus of the VC classes or the Moore Park classes.
But if they were to take AP courses, that could count towards that too, so those would be within the 4.
But you wouldn't graduate with your AA.
Exactly, that's correct. But right, it could help you with college
could
credit.
add it to the other college, right? to
Only
get
if the
an A.
college allows it, and a lot of colleges cap you. They
Okay.
don't really, and, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody who has been able to say, oh, I have my AA through AP classes.
Does VC cap then on AP courses, do we know?
UC does.
it's
UC
no longer
does, but-
AP, right? At VC, it's just a college class. It would refer
You
to
mean to
anything
the-
as AP, wouldn't it?
Are you asking what does
Are you saying
VC
as far as
accept?
VC's transcripts, what do they accept?
Right,
If I
whether
came
they would
in,
accept the AP courses,
I
yeah.
have no idea.
Because most people wouldn't get an AA at a UC.
Right.
Right. I'm not sure if you would transfer AP classes over to VC if you went there. I think you would just use both when you end up
Yeah.
applying to a 4-year. But I could be wrong. I'm not sure how they do it at VC.
Does your sense of the contract, I just didn't read it for this issue, does it I mean, it's a contract, but in each instance, it requires us both to be effectively to agree, right? It's an
Yes.
agreement to agree.
Yes.
So in other words, we wouldn't be signing the contract and then obligated to provide X or Y
No.
classes. It would be, this is the structure, and now we're gonna work out the details on a
Right.
per class basis.
Right.
One thing about the summer is, in the summer scenario, we would be potentially in actual competition with them, right? I mean, how does it work in the summer? No one's taking 4 classes in the summer. So
No,
let's
but-
say someone's taking a class with them in the summer in lieu of taking a class with us. That's all them and nothing for us, right?
I am not sure how that model would work. I mean, I assume that it would work differently in the summertime. I mean, I'm not even sure it would probably just be a course that we offer on our campus, but not necessarily collect ADA because we wouldn't be collecting ADA on that kid anyway over summer.
Do we not, like when we have summer school, do we not?
Well,
collect
that's
ADA?
different if the kid's
Okay.
in summer school, yeah. But I don't think we'd be targeting the kids that are taking summer school. Not that they couldn't be enrolled in a dual
Yeah.
enrollment class, but likely we'd be just trying to offer additional courses over summer that
So
are.
it'd be a student advantage rather than a district advantage.
Yeah. And really, I think all of this is geared toward benefiting the student,
Yeah.
right?
Can I put you on the spot and ask, what's your biggest concern? Not that you have to have a big concern, but what's the top of your list of the things that concern you about
My
this
biggest
program?
concern is our teachers and making sure that they feel supported during the process, so that their stipend is such that it matches any additional workload. It shouldn't be a lot of extra workload for them, but certainly I don't want to be burdening them with more work. As long as the site, the people that are working, like the liaison, helping coordinate the paperwork, and the teacher are getting a stipend that seems fair and appropriate, I think the rest is a win-win. I mean, it benefits students to a great degree, in my opinion, so.
I would assume we would do this as a voluntary thing. I mean, I would assume we wouldn't impose this on any
certainly.
teacher. Would you guys have a
No,
sense
I
otherwise?
wouldn't want to impose it on
Yeah.
anybody. Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on. We'll vote on it later. Okay, 7.4.1 is a public hearing on proposed energy conservation services agreement with Climatech. So I would like a motion to open a public hearing.
I'll
Go
move to open the public hearing.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the Climatech?
We do have Ashley and Amber here from Climatech with us, so they also can answer any questions that anyone has.
Their facial expressions told me they were not expecting to get up and give a presentation.
There's no
They're like,
no
"What?"
presentation there. Available for questions.
They have a PowerPoint.
Can I speak during the public session?
Of course.
Public hearing? I think, I'm so excited about this. I just love it. So if we can save, we can help the environment, we can save money, we can, you know, make our schools brighter, cooler, you know, more energy efficient. It seems like a great idea. I'm showing my hand, I guess.
But you never know what will
But that's
happen.
right, you guys could convince me otherwise, or someone from the audience. Oh, say, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. 7.4.2 is actually discussion on the resolution itself.
So I'll just give a little information on this, and once again, it's something that we will not be acting on until the special meeting. But as Jane, I completely agree with your comments. I think this is a very exciting thing for our district. I'm quite proud that this will be the biggest expenditure of Measure J dollars to date. What we're looking at across the district is full lighting improvements, lighting replacement to LED bulbs, automation of systems and switches across the district, and then HVAC replacement.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
HVAC replacement and Wi-Fi automation at our 3 largest sites, and those sites were also selected not just because of their size and the student body population they're serving, but also the condition of those units. So something that absolutely is needed as far as having working air conditioning at our sites. Each of those sites did have air conditioning issues during our high heat the past month, and especially at the start of the school year. But what really is an exciting opportunity is to use these one-time Measure J dollars for an ongoing operational savings. And so if you'll see actually in the explanation of this agenda item that the net general fund savings in year 1 is $172,000 for this initiative. And that's not just one of those, you know, I'm finance guy, I certainly have seen my share of, you know, these great projections of savings you might realize, and then you never actually talk to the person who promised those savings again, and you know, have no way of verifying or otherwise actually seeing those savings. The second part of this contract is actually a measurement and verification agreement where Climatech remains partners with us and is responsible for actually verifying true savings to the district to ensure that we are you know, getting what was promised. And so they actually put up a guarantee to state that we will realize the sufficient savings to pay for this project over the course of the life of the upgrades. So we have the ability in that measurement and verification agreement to end that agreement at any time with 60 days notice. And so what is common is typically the districts will only hold on to it for a couple of years. And then once they actually are realizing the savings that they were anticipating, then there's no need to, you know, it's unlikely if you see the savings of nearly $200,000 each year for the first 3 or 4 years that all of a sudden something's going to change in year 5 or 8 or any point beyond. And so they often will save the expense of having that verification and you know, have confidence that things are as they were supposed to be. So I think this is going to be a great way to use both Prop 39 dollars, developer fee dollars, as well as a portion of Measure J.
Is there anything in here that shows us which portion of each we're using, or? I don't know.
No, it's not in there. Nope. I will note that you've received actually an update to the Exhibit A from what was initially mailed out on Friday as well, which does just state on Exhibit A, page 4, exactly, it's in front of you. Incorrectly it stated before that a municipal lease would be what would pick up the remaining portion after Prop 39. And now the exhibit correctly states that district funds, which as we discussed, will be a combination of Measure J and developer fee dollars that will fund the remaining portion.
I think we got the breakdown last month.
Yeah, because we know we have like 600 and something thousand in the developer.
We have actually closer to $1 million in the developer fees.
And we're spending that entirely down.
We will be spending it entirely down. I actually don't know right now if that will be entirely spent down on the climate tech proposal or if there'll be other projects currently listed as Measure J facility
And that
upgrades.
was about 5 years, is that what I remember?
Yeah, that's true.
And what about Prop 39? Once we tap for this, then that money is gone to us?
Well, I'll give you guys a minute to think about your answer. But Prop 39 was passed in 2012. It was a 5-year funding allocation for school districts for this exact purpose, for energy efficiency, energy enhancements. So the allocation came out on an annual basis over those 5 years. This happens to be the 5th year, and so now is the time that we're able to spend all of it. Had we tried to spend a portion back in 2013, then we only would have had a small fraction of this money available to us. And so each year, more of it was released. I'd be really interested, since you guys are so well connected up in Sacramento, do you have, I know there's been discussion of potentially a renewal of this or an increase. I know there are municipalities and other groups who are interested in trying to get access to these funds as well, but what do you guys hear?
So the initial bill for Proposition 39 was a 5-year program, and we're entering this fiscal year right now is the final year of that program. But what there is remaining is a large portion of funds that were not used by districts that just unfortunately couldn't meet the requirements, or for whatever reason the funds were unused. So all of those funds, the unused funds for Proposition 39, are going to be reallocated in a similar fashion that the original funds were allocated, and most likely going to go through the Energy Commission's 0% loan program. And so that will be applied for based on a first come, first served basis. And the details of how those are allocated in the future are unknown at this point. After January is when they expect that the rules will be out on that. In addition to that, there was SB 110 and SB 518, 2 legislations that were passed that that get rid of the sunset on Proposition 39 and keep the Citizen Oversight Board for that program in place. And so what that means is that the method to actually get energy efficiency grant dollars in the program and the oversight committee for that is going to remain in place. But unlike the original legislation, there has to be a carve out of funding in the governor's budget each year for that. So the legislation is there that'll make it possible, but outside of the unused funds from the original allocation, we don't know how much funding is actually going to be allotted for that. So hopefully by this time next year, when the new budget is put together, we'll have an idea, but it could be on a year-to-year basis of an unknown. So it could just be additional funding as years, each year for different maintenance projects.
You wouldn't be able to hold it for the 5 years. You'd have to spend it each year.
Potentially.
Yeah, and it's unknown, but the oversight committee that was put in place for Proposition 39 and the review committee at the Energy Commission has actually been pretty functional. Compared to a lot of other programs like this, where you just, unfortunately, it was more headache than it was worth. They've really done a pretty good job. So knowing that those resources are going to stay in place is encouraging. That it could continue to be a positive funding source for school facilities in the future.
So you would certainly think that this is, about as political as a political item could be. You're giving money to public schools, and you're doing it in a energy efficiency, green motivation. The challenge has been that, as Amber was saying, that we have so many districts across the state. Sorry, Ashley. As soon as I said it, I saw you guys glance at each other.
People always do that.
It happens all the time.
The reality is just so many districts have not taken advantage of this. Last I saw, it was something like 40% of districts hadn't actually submitted their right. It's a really large number of districts that have allocations. that for, again, many reasons, and actually, unfortunately, Valley Oak is an example of an LEA who has an allocation and doesn't qualify to be able to use it because you can't use it on property you're renting. And so they are not able to, or I don't know if it's actually a rental issue or if it's the type of building that they are renting, but I know that they're not able to use their allocation because of those issues. So they were allocated, I believe, $75,000 that's going to go back to the state level and hopefully be reallocated that we'll get a small portion of. But there are a lot of districts that just for whatever reason have not been able to submit those reports and get this underway.
Andy, I might forget it if otherwise. I noticed a couple of things. Paragraph 1 and 9 each have different numbers for the amount in question. Paragraph 1 references 2,900,000. This is page 10 of 144. Paragraph 1 says 2,906,000 and change. Paragraph 9 says the price of this agreement is 3,030,000 and change. I'm assuming that's an error.
So it looks to me like that number that's in item or section 9 was actually the original number.
Yes.
So we will make the modification to the contract to actually be in agreement with what's in line 1 or in section 1.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what happened. Our contracts administrator reduced this after the discount was given, and probably it just didn't get changed right there. But what the resolution states is that if approved, that the board would be giving authorization for the superintendent or district council to make any modifications as needed. So there's that and any other.
I'm just knowing that I might forget to ever bring that up.
No, thank
That's
you.
why I bring
Thank
it up.
you for bringing that
And
up.
the other thing is, it says that it includes a performance bond. If requested, I would say we obviously would request the performance bond. So
Yes.
make sure we do that. And then just for our discussion, at some point, there is an arbitration provision. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but any dispute is going to be resolved by arbitration.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to us suing. Or them suing.
Anything else in the 144-page document, which I confess not to have read?
It's really only probably about 8 pages or so of the agreement. The rest are all of the technical attachments for all the scope of work, the manufacturer specifications and everything that was included in that.
And
Sorry
lots of
that it was-
pictures. I
Yeah.
looked at the pictures.
I did look at the attachment stuff, scope of work at each school.
You know how it goes with these types of projects. It's just always good to have all of that included so that there's no changing of fixtures later.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will take action on that later this evening.
I don't think so, right? Isn't that?
Well,
This is
But
one
this
that we'll
one-
take
okay, this
action
is
on
after,
later.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, so we were able to hold the public hearing during this regularly scheduled meeting, which
Got it,
was a
got it.
requirement for the approval, and then we will take a vote on this at the special meeting. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Sure.
No,
Okay.
we won't even discuss it, we'll just
Okay.
have the motion.
Okay. Thank you.
If you're nervous about what we might do.
Go to OBC, have a few drinks, let you know our decision.
7.4.3, Ohio Unified School District's Internet Safety Policy. Again, I think first thing is to open for a public comments, so if someone would move to,
I'll move to open a public hearing.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
None opposed. Would anyone like to comment on the internet safety policy? Okay,
I
motion.
think we should keep our internet safe.
Great public comment.
A motion to close the public hearing. I'll actually move to close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Shelley? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. I guess, is there any questions about the policy that any of the board members have? Actually, I just had a quick question on page 3 of 4, where it talks about the education. Hi, David. It says the education of minors about appropriate online behavior, including interaction with other individuals on social networking sites and in chat rooms. So my question was just like, where do we have where does that happen, or how does that happen?
There's actually a free curriculum developed that most states are using. So we've been sourcing with all your teachers and staff to see which version they liked. There's one version where you do it in first grade, third, fifth, or you have one module every year, and after about 3 years, everybody's seen every distinct module. And I think we've decided to go with every year. It's about 45 minutes per year, per classroom. So we're gonna have to figure out a structured way to have teachers sign that they have done their training and collect them all, make sure everybody has them. So these are a couple new things that the E-rate folks want us to be doing. So at least they have provided the resources to get that done. That way we're not incurring extra costs for more training.
Right. I like that yearly model too.
Yeah.
Because so much changes in the kids' daily access.
Exactly.
Every year.
Yeah, and I've gone through a couple of the modules, and I think they're nice because they are age appropriate. All the way through high school, they're they develop and they get better and better each time. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, David. 7.4.4, Measure J update.
Ron, you can come on up, and while he is, I'll give the introduction. So I will say that I'm tremendously proud to finally have this 11-page document before you. We passed Measure J in November of 2014. As I know everyone around this table and those in the audience know as well, that prior to the passage of Measure J, Balfour Beatty did a needs assessment of our facilities and identified about $100 million in need across the district. The challenge was actually, even with that level of analysis, they didn't actually have the analysis tied too closely, as odd as this may sound, with the condition of individual buildings at each site. They never identified in that 100,000 that there was these 4 buildings that actually needed new roofs at Nordhoff. Instead, what they said was, we can see that in general the condition of these roofs are poor. We're going to assume that a general square percent of overall square footage require the replacement, and then use a cost factor for that. So they did that. $100 million was the need. We asked them to give us another option and kind of pare that back, and so they said, okay, about $60 million or so was the pared back. This is not going to quite get you where you need to, but at least be a good movement in the right direction. And then I believe we hired John Isom and his team, a consultant who helped us with the actual bond language itself and is assisting with the sale of the bonds. And the work that he did suggested that this community, at the time in 2014, given the economic conditions, really would likely support something closer in the neighborhood of $35 million. So that's frankly why we went out for $35 million, not because of the need. The need was 3 times that, but instead it was because of what we felt confident the community would support, and we knew that we needed to get a bond passed. And so for now nearly 3 years, we really have not had a full plan, and certainly have not had a full understanding of where the prioritized need is across the district. Again, knowing the exact classrooms and buildings that might need roof replacement, or the actual buildings that have carpet that require replacement and that might have hazardous materials in them, and that sort of thing. And so this has been a long process to get to this point, and this ultimately is just the first in what will be many more conversations. This is only a discussion item, and again, the goal is to initiate discussion. There's going to be discussions at every site, certainly among leadership, even more so, with making sure that people understand what Measure J is going to be able to do at each site. I felt at times as we worked, first with Josh Brown, Balfour Beatty, Ron, David Rogers, our maintenance operations team, site leadership at different points over the past year and a half to help build out this list, in addition to using different facility assessments and other tools to really try to gauge the need.
Chuck's great.
Yeah, certainly, exactly. That as we did this, and ultimately identified this prioritized list, it's almost, which wing of the airplane do you prefer? It's very much how do you, choose between just such crucial needs of either air conditioning in rooms that otherwise, are rather hot, or roofs that are leaking on children. And so, what we tried to put forward here was the initial scenario of what we believe we can do to really have the Metro J dollars go as far as possible and appropriately spread across the sites. This document will, once we get more feedback from both you as well as the community, will be put in a much more user-friendly and consolidated version, but you're able to see that the way that this was developed was really looking at a few categories of need: preservation and restoration of structure, health, fire, life, safety, and then some upgrade or modernizations. However, again, even the modernizations oftentimes are, carpet and hazardous material abatement, some of those sorts of areas. So, there are many things that actually Cheryl and I had a rather spirited conversation earlier today talking about, how can we possibly leave off projects X, Y, and Z from this list. And unfortunately, that's just where we are. That with Measure J, we are going to have to leave projects off that we'd all love to see. Again, this is not the finalized list of projects. It will continue to be a living document, and certainly as we get more budget information and actually have budget turn into scoped out projects and bid projects and get full updated financial information, we'll also know our ability to increase or add projects to this list. But that's what this goal is ultimately I made a commitment to you guys. I wasn't going to ask you to vote on the Climate Tech proposal, what will be multiple millions of dollars of Measure J dollars, without giving you some context of what the broader plan looks like. So the Climate Tech proposal is included in here. The other things I'll just note as far as general things that are included, again, you can certainly see a lot of roof replacements, and so that's going to be our major focus for 2018. In addition to continue to work on the library, and Climate Tech is really going to be focused on, we know the roof projects now, we have a very clear list, and so that's going to be a major priority. But roof projects, you'll see that we have turf reduction and replacement at a number of sites, hazardous material abatement and carpeting and flooring replacement at a number of sites, HVAC across the district, blinds in every single classroom across the district. That's been an identified need. And then the two projects that are well, at least one project I should say that's a project I'm really excited about, but is something that may not fall into the other categories of true, fire life safety need, is solar. So we do have solar currently included on the list of projects for each site. I believe that solar, just like what we were talking about earlier, is a unique opportunity for us to use these one-time dollars to be able to have an ongoing operational savings, which can help us keep teachers' jobs or help us be able to buy that next round of curriculum and textbooks that we need that we otherwise may not be able to during a constrained fiscal condition. So I'm very interested in that. I've heard the board express a strong interest, and so it currently is in there. But you'll note that there are a number of things that, again, are not in here. Most significantly, perhaps the pool, which we've had a number of conversations around this table discussing a significant pool improvement. You will see the pools here, but it's really just keeping it to code to be able to keep it open, meeting the requirements of the health department, but it's not actually a full improvement of the pool. So this list was something that the Measure J subcommittee worked through pretty extensively back in the spring of 2016 when Josh was still here, Josh Brown, as well as when Balfour Beatty was more involved. Again, the document has been living over the past year and a half and being modified with Ron's input, with David's input, with R&T, our architects, and so that's ultimately what you have before you today is something that really is trying to move the ball forward, have a discussion about what a scenario of how the dollars will end up being distributed. But just as I often or always say with my enrollment projections, the one thing I can say with certainty is that we will not have sit here 6 years from now and say that this was the exact projects that were completed under Measure J. There will be changes certainly, and your input will influence that.
If I could say, this is a massive improvement over what we've had. This is fantastic. It's a great step. I think that, as you've said, I think we need to build on it. One thing that would help me, and I don't know if it's possible, but we have the totals, but we don't have the line item cost. So if we could have an idea about what each of these items would cost, I think that would help a lot.
So just so you know, the strategy on that was, since this is a public document, we wanted to be cautious with having that information
Sure.
go out and
Right.
ultimately,
To
you know, a
bidders.
roofing contractor
Yeah, exactly.
say, oh, you're budgeting $600,000
Right.
for the roof at Nordhoff's, you know, gym, then that's what we happen to,
No,
perfect,
that
that's what
makes
we're gonna come in
that
at.
makes a
So-
lot of sense.
So
But
that is,
maybe
but,
something that we could use. It seems.
And I'll
to-
say, Lane, I'm on the subcommittee and we explicitly discussed that. It's not
Yeah,
just
no, I think that's the right call.
That's very much
Yeah.
the.
I totally agree with the decision, yeah. But there are things like, well, like the solar power, I think that's fantastic. And I think that at the end of the $35 million, it is important that we fix the things that we can fix. But I think that we do need some things that we can point to as accomplishments. And I know that we have talked about the solar power. I think improvements to the library are something. But I still want to push for a pool. And so if there's a way we can go through the numbers and figure out what the sacrifice is.
Right.
What is the trade-off? You know, maybe I'll say, you're absolutely right, we can't afford it. Or maybe we say, you know, like when I read the information about the library, there were two versions. And it seemed like the consensus was for the more expensive one, but I don't know if that was in context of you can have the more expensive one or the cheap one, and everyone said, well, we'll have the more expensive one. Or if it was, you can have, you know, the more expensive one and no pool, or a pool and the cheaper one. I don't know what the context was, so I think that now that we have more detailed information, I would like to have those conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed it, Payne. And that really is what the goal was with putting forward this document, was to, again, give us a starting point. This has been, you know, this is not a hastily arrived at, you know, proposal. This is, again, 18 months plus in the making. But ultimately, this is only a starting point, but it's really to help us know pool is a priority for this board and the community. Well, here are 4 projects then that will not be able to be done by doing the pool. Now, again, I think that's very possible that this community would support the pool nonetheless, or support, you know, a new playground structure at Topa, or whatever the, you know, proposal might be. But let's make sure that we realize now, let's choose from the current projects of, if we're going to prioritize a playground at Topa, which of these projects might be removed, or, you know, whatever site it might be.
And that gives us a chance to have the public comment as
Exactly.
well, because it's important to get the public's input on, you know,
And
what are
my-
the trade-offs?
My opinion on the pool is that is a perfect opportunity for mutual work with the city and the community and fundraising, and nobody's gonna help us put roofs on the buildings. But this pool that people want, I think we could harness that. So if we do it in here, we can't harness the community to be involved in that. So my inclination would be do the things that we know the community's not gonna pitch in for. And let's figure out a way to fundraise and to get participation with the city and find grants and move more in a collaborative direction on the pool. That's neat.
And I support that, except I want a backup plan if we can't get the money.
My question, Andy, is what
Yeah.
is the rationale to spending more than twice the amount that any other school is getting at Nordhoff? Especially considering the last bond that we had was almost entirely spent at Nordhoff.
Yeah, that's a great question. So just so everyone knows, we do have the total project cost by a per site basis. We did not fall in line perfectly by any means with what the needs assessment. So if you recall that Balfour Bay needs assessment that had the individual school site, you know, that arrived at 35 million, they did break it out on a site-by-site basis of what their, you know, allocation was based on the size of the school, both the building size as well as, I believe, students were factored into it. These are generally in line, but again, they didn't take into account the condition of the facilities themselves, and so we did that here. And so there was some adjustment from there. But if you do kind of a general sanity check, you know, comparing these to the documents that are going out to the community during the time of the passage, they're generally in line. And if you look at the size of the school, the larger elementaries are certainly an appropriate portion ahead of the smaller elementaries. The rationale for Nordoff being as high as it is both the reality of the number of students again that they have, as well as the fact that they are the far and away largest facility that we have. So whereas Topa may only have what would it be, about 60% of students that Nordoff has, they actually have less than a third of the number of facilities that Nordoff has. And so when you actually factor in both the student population, but the bigger issue of the size of the facility and the buildings themselves, that was why Nordoff is coming in definitely larger than the other schools.
And my understanding, I mean, I came to town right after that first bond, but that bond built the science building and the music building.
Yeah.
It didn't upgrade buildings.
It didn't, and the administrative building.
Right.
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 That's true. Oh, I had a question, now it's gone. Oh, I wasn't involved in discussions as to the library. Can somebody fill me in on, I understand the library's in disrepair, but there's a lot of emphasis on redoing the library. What is the background on that? Why?
So, first of all, just to reiterate, there is no definite plan for the library at this point.
Right.
What we've done is we've assembled groups at various points along the way that were as large as 20 people, made up of teachers, classified employees, including both our grounds maintenance and the librarian, pulling in a few board members, pulling in NPA volunteers, to really talk about what we could do in this space. And so the library.
First of all, the library has leaking, right?
Right.
There's major structural.
So a library concept will come to the board more than once before anything is actually, of course, asked to be voted on by you guys. But Jane is right on as far as the reason that the library has been identified is I think it actually was one of the buildings that was most identified during the campaign for Measure J of it's so visibly in disrepair. There are roofs that are leaking, the HVAC is underpowered for the building. It's an underutilized space and really does not capture the way that library media centers are now being used. There is carpeting that is well beyond its usable life and is a tripping hazard, and the reason we can't do anything with it is because there's hazardous material underneath, and so we'd have to abate it, and currently it is encapsulated, so there's no health risk to the students. Andrew, make sure. No health risk currently. But so that was why the library has been focused on, is that we know that if it's going to continue to stand, then there has to be what we worked out to be between $1 million and $1.2 million in work. And so what we're saying is, as Thane said, if we're going to have a few projects that we can really point to of not just simply repairing a leaking roof, but having some additional investment in there to really be able to be something, a banner project that we're able to point to as far as a true improvement in the way that a school campus functions. We believe that this library, for what will be going from perhaps a $1.2 million budget up to a 1.8 to 2.1, in that range, $1 million project. So certainly an increase, but not a $5 million project or anything like that. So that's why the library's been identified. It has very clear need from the foundation and flooring up to the roof and the HVAC, but it's also something that we really want to be able to point to as far as the next 30 years of the campus being able to be used in a really positive manner.
Mark, can you tell me on 2E, it says removal of wooden 4x4 railings. This is on Nordoff.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? And
those are between A building and B building, the original buildings on where the old admin building was. They put a railing around there because there was kids walking across, and there's a drainage area, and they basically put it across there just to keep them on the sidewalk. And it's falling over, it's dying, and there's got to be a better way to protect that area, if anything, to be honest with you. So basically, that's what that was for. Just to
but you have to remove the footings too. You can't just take the fence down.
But yeah, you just cut it down, then you've got a chunk of cement sitting there that gets in the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have questions at each site, I think.
Okay.
At Matilla.
I'm sorry, as long as we're on that, is that the fence along the parking lot at that end of the campus? Or
No,
that's a
it's
different
between
one?
the two buildings. It's-
Right between the two buildings.
Yeah, it's only about 40 feet of fencing maybe, not even
Okay.
that. And it's just basically band-aided together, it's falling over, it just needs to be removed.
And real quick, Jane, if it's, maybe before you get into each individual site, I think that was a great example of just a reminder that these projects are not necessarily all going to be large projects that have to be outsourced using contractors and other outside people. Some of these we can accomplish internally, and so this is not a statement about who will be doing the work, but rather how the work will be funded. So something like that, it's possible that our staff can do the work, but we may end up having, if there's something that's replacing it, being funded out of Measure J, or if we have to end up bringing in some subs to help cover the basic, maintenance work during that period of time, or the grounds work during that time, then there's going to be a portion that will be funded from this. But
Or a dumpster.
Or exactly. So not all these projects are multi-million-dollar projects. Some are rather small, but still are appropriate and warrant funding from here rather than out of our general operational budget. Sorry.
No. Matilaha, the tennis court. I don't see the tennis court used a lot there. Is it because it's in bad shape and they would like to use it, or am I wrong about?
That's a possibility. I don't know exactly how much use it gets, but it's get used during the tennis tournament and all that.
Right.
And the surface has just been eroded over the years, and it's like asphalt, it dies, and you have to resurface it and recoat it.
Right.
So,
well, I know that, but I know that the Ojai tournament has been very kind in paying for a lot of the,
sure.
At Nordhoff and stuff, the resurfacing. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, the story that I remember is that the drainage is an issue, and then that erodes the court faster. So again, like Andy was saying, it's not necessarily that that's priority one. It's just something that has been entered on the list as a previous issue, and it could be something we could address with our own staff. It may not need any larger project.
I think that's an interesting question. I'm pro tennis.
I know, me too. If anybody knows, I have to be very
You may
involved
not
in
be,
tennis.
but the question is, I have never seen.
There used to be a tennis team
At
at Matilaha.
There still is.
Was
maybe
coached
not
it for
this
a
year,
while.
but
I don't think
yeah.
there is this year, but there has been in the past, and it basically depends on whether they can find a coach or not.
Okay, because when my kids were there, I don't think there was. There may have been.
Well, I think we started it. Mark and I did it with Pierre for 2 years, and then Carolyn and Mike came in and did the next 2 years. And I don't know if it
I
continued.
don't think it's
after
going
that,
right
but-
now.
Yeah.
I don't think so right now, and we also keep that area locked, just so it's not a foot traffic area and doesn't get utilized on the weekends, and try to keep them in as good a repair as we can.
Yeah. So that's the question. If it's not
Well,
used,
do the PE
then
classes use it?
Typically, not that often. I mean, I've seen them in there a few times, but again, it's going to be somebody who actually is playing tennis. Not they don't do the paddle ball or anything less.
That tennis isn't part of the PE curriculum, no.
So currently, because of the condition of the drainage, it costs approximately $12,000 to do the resurfacing, and we did it just 2 or 3 years ago, and we're actually going to be doing it here again soon. The tournament has been very generous, and I believe Mark has been generous in the past as well. I think he's been a contributor as well, or both of you have been. But the tournament is picking up half the cost for the resurfacing coming up in the next few months. I believe we are working on the contract right now. But because of the condition of the drainage, we're having to do this every 2 to 3 years, and so a $12,000 expense. We don't know how long it's going to be supported by the tournament. It's something that we either continue to have that ongoing expense, or we for one opportunity actually take care of the underlying issue, so that way we get much more life out of it.
And that's 2 to 3 years drought years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Fair point.
And then my last question was at Topa Topa, the outdoor track.
Yeah. So that's just an error. We intend to have it be grass field restoration, and I think that in the process of communicating with R&T, they still had the old identified project, but far greater priority is trying to reduce the footprint of irrigation there, and then really focus on actually having a grass play field in that area as opposed to the track, which is underutilized.
Right. Yeah, because they tend to use.
Exactly, and so the portion of the reason they have track is that we've continued to talk about a DG track similar to what Miramani has, but Miramani had that nearly, it was done by volunteers and I think funded pretty much by volunteers as well, and so the extent to which a track would exist at Topa Topa would likely be DG or something like that, as opposed to actually the full restoration of the track or the resurfacing of the track that's currently there.
Okay.
And we have to look at the, how much use it gets versus the cost ensued and such.
Right.
Because running on grass is nice, but then if there are gophers or whatever.
Yeah,
Well,
certainly.
and it becomes a dog park.
Yeah.
Topa does.
Yeah.
Used to. They still dogs out there? They
No, they still have the
Prohibited
bag
them,
thing,
I
I
thought.
think.
Yeah,
They try to keep it closed.
and I hadn't, since the 3 years I was there, I never heard any complaints that I believe were happening before, like kids stepping in dog manure and that sort of stuff. I never heard complaints when I was there, so I think it is not being used much, at least at this point.
I think they all go to Nordhoff now. They just stick them there because I see them nearly every night.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much.
So real quick, if it's okay, Ron, do you mind giving 20-second just update on the two projects that ran past the summer and that we are wrapping up?
Okay, the Topa Topa Kitchen is going to open officially on Monday. We got a few minor items to take care of this week, and a few things that they needed that we didn't expect. Get some cleaning done beyond what we thought we needed to do, but it needs to be done. So we're getting that taken care of, and they're really excited about it, and it's coming together, and it's turned out really nice, and it was worth the wait. It was too bad it had to run through the summer a little bit farther than it should have, but it all came together, and everybody's really happy with it. And then the stage at Nordhoff for the cafeteria came together very well. We had some visitors there, and I think it turned out incredibly, really good. I think they're going to have a really good venue there. And the lighting, they got the sound system put in a couple of weeks ago, and that's supposed to be really high tech on that, so they really tested it out. And we're going to have an open house here, the 14th of November, I believe.
Yeah, I'll send it out once it's firmed up. But Kim Hoy, of course, continues to be amazing with that project, and so is working organizing an open house for or an official grand opening for the stage, and that we're looking at likely November 14th. But once it's finalized, well send that out.
It all came together.
Thank you,
Ron, I
Ron.
know this isn't one of your projects, but when you talk about the delays, what is happening over at Matilaha with the Rotary project? Do you have any clue? I heard they were waiting for DSA, and that came through, but it's still been 2 weeks since that supposedly came through.
Last I heard it was the DSA. They had issues with the DSA as far as what the framer had framed, and there were corrections that they had to go through. And
so disappointed.
It is very disappointing, but that's common, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, it may start raining
It may.
this year, so.
7.5.1.
It's not a projection.
Suicide prevention board policy.
So this was actually in a prior set of board policy recommendations from CSBA. We held off on having it at that time because we didn't have you guys actually vote on it at that time. It was pulled out because this really is a new policy that requires a significant amount of new work for Janine Murphy, our mental health clinician. And so she worked on this a lot over the summer, went to a number of trainings at VCOE and exactly how to implement it. I know she's excited to share with you the actual program that we have, or the actual prevention strategies that she's putting in place in the district. But ultimately, this is supposed to be approved immediately, and so we're not required to have it go for a first and second hearing. So my recommendation was to have this come to you just for direct approval tonight as a single board policy change, fully in agreement with the new statutes from 2016 for suicide prevention, separate from the rest of the packet. So that's why it's in here like this, called out separate.
Any questions on it? Okay, first reading of the May 2017 CSBA Governing Board Policies. As always, I will just give you a range of pages, and if you have any questions in there, I'll do 1 through 35. Oh, just a preface, I have quite a few that are just, hey, this is new, we need to make sure we're doing it. I don't have a question about doing it, I just want to sort of bring.
Remind me of the NWAC, it's NWAC.
New wording, but okay, so it's slightly new wording, but it's not a substantive change.
And that's what, yeah, the okay, that's just, who is that? That's
John Walker.
Yeah.
It's
always been like, what?
Yeah, so the
I'm
coding
good with
scheme, the coding scheme is from Jim Berube, but when John took over doing board policy updates, he maintained that same coding scheme. If you guys prefer something else, we can.
Well, no, I
provide
just was,
something
I
else.
mean, I remember having someone explain it the first time we looked at it, and then I've, over the years, just,
I
you
had
know.
to ask when I
Yeah,
first
and,
started.
but the funny thing is, that's always implied to me that the new is, you know, it's like you're withholding the, you know, the love of the child. This one's new, not okay. So those are the ones I look at closely.
No, okay means it's it's the same as our previous
Right.
policy, and
I actually Googled, I'm like, NW.
Oh, did you?
What is this? What is this? It's not there.
I don't remember
No,
the same thing. Looking at it, it's like
I don't know
nitrogen
what
with,
this means.
it's not like nitrogen's part of it, so.
But if it would be less work, I would be fine with NWOK just being new. If there's new wording and we could read it and.
But it helps to
No,
know
it's
if
a-
it's
yeah.
new, or if it's,
Yeah.
it's already been there and they just.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're assured, and we should probably every now and then reassure ourselves that the NWAC, new okay, is really effectively the same language, because I do confess that I don't pay as much attention to those, because my sense of it is it's like the old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I mean,
that's
there
a
must
correct
be
sense.
some discretion, you know, with sometimes it's more like the old and less like the old. So I don't know.
Sure.
But if we don't like old policies, we can change those too.
Right.
Unless
Although they
they're
typically
mandatory.
conform with law, yeah.
Right.
well, I'm gonna bring us to page 16. New, just making sure, maybe, I don't know, David, that our Title IX information is posted on the district website. Thank you, Kathy. Anyone, I have something on 25, anything have something before that? The second paragraph under new also, the board may decide not to hear the complaint, in which case the compliant officer's decision shall be final. I am of the opinion that if someone wants to bring it to the board, we should hear it.
Totally agree.
So I would like to strike that line.
Yes.
Or I guess may, but
May not.
may
May not decide not
may
to.
decide not, I don't know.
No, I agree, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It's
I
like,
hear.
you know, how do you know that you know, you gotta hear the complaint and then you decide if it has merit? You can't, how do you decide not to hear it?
Yeah.
Now everybody's gonna bring complaints. I'm fine with the change.
So we'll strike may decide not to and just have shall.
No, just end it,
The
just
board
strike
shall
Can I
hear
ask
the
a
complaint.
question
Well,
though? Currently, the uniform complaints are handled by Andy. They don't come to the board level.
right, but it says, if a person doesn't like the decision,
Yes,
then they could bring it to the board.
yes.
As long as it's within 60 days.
So shall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so we just take out that
Right.
last sentence.
Yep. That's what updated.
And I agree completely, Jim.
It hardly ever happens.
Right,
So,
and we've
yeah.
had once in my 4 years, so.
Right.
So removing the last sentence, are we also changing the first sentence? Or does it remain the same?
The board may consider the matter at its next regular board meeting or at a special board meeting convened in order to meet the 60-day time limit, which,
So
within which
will,
the appointment.
will then instead of may?
Well, no, I think the May is giving discretion as to whether or not it's at the regular board meeting or at the special.
But the will means it will be either, whereas the may suggests it might not be either.
Shall, okay, I will.
Or that might give us discretion if we have a full agenda and we want to move it a month. We could.
But it has to be within the 60
Okay,
days.
so that's fine.
Okay, moving on, 36 through 65.
My first one is on 44.
I have one on 43.
What's yours on 43? I have 43 too.
At least once each year, food service personnel shall receive training provided by, is that already happening, or,
Yep.
because it says new?
That's what I wondered too. We have ongoing professional development
Oh, absolutely.
for food
Yeah, so all of our food services staff actually come in during a day in August before the rest of staff return for professional development with them. And then we only have one administrator, and that's our actual director of nutrition, Julie Chesson, and she is going to a number of trainings on an annual basis required for her ongoing certification.
Mine was really more of a question. I just was concerned about
The first paragraph?
such students not be overtly identified. And I just wanted to know how we're handling that at the different, at the elementary and at the high school.
Do
How
you
are we
have-
not
yeah?
overtly?
I don't have it in front of me.
So my understanding is that it's as far as there's no distinction between a child who's on free and reduced meals and someone who's not when it comes to when they're going through the line to
No.
pick up their
They
meal.
just use their number.
They just use
Exactly,
their
and
student
so
number.
there's no
And they all have the same looking card.
Right.
It's all the same. And
Exactly.
so kids that put
Perfect.
money on their account
Right.
do the exact same thing that a free and reduced lunch
Perfect.
kid would
Right.
do.
Perfect.
It's all the
Yeah,
same.
right.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yep, absolutely.
It was more for the people watching at home.
Page 50, I have a
I have
couple.
a question on page 46. I'm just curious about the domesticity of our food.
Oh, yeah,
At the bottom of, is that where it is?
we shall.
Oh, a non-domestic food product may be purchased for use in the district's office, our food service program, only as a last resort. And do we pay attention at all to?
Well, this
So,
is new, so obviously
yeah,
our new
frankly,
director.
I don't know the extent to which that's a conscious effort. I do know that we're heavily restricted on what can be purchased. And so there are these, large agreements that are with only certain food providers that are providing to all school districts. And so I imagine that they're the ones who are more focused on the compliance, but I will certainly check with Julie and confirm that she's aware of this new policy.
Because with fruit in the time of the year,
Right,
There
you're
could be an
getting it
impact,
from
yeah.
Chile if it's in the winter.
Well, and meat often comes. Who knows? Sorry, Jane.
That's all right, no, that's what we should be doing, page 50. At the begin, let's see, the superintendent or designee shall communicate the district's meal policy placements on the district website. Again, I think that is correct, that happens, right? Just checking, double checking.
And my question on page 50 was just, I'm wondering how well known it is to parents that they can prepay the food, the account. I actually had another parent tell me that was how she did it, and I went, aha, that makes sense. So to prepay it says up here,
Yeah,
encouraged to prepay the meals whenever possible. I didn't know if we were actively letting parents
You know
know
what,
that that was
remember
a
how
possibility.
that's one of those things that comes in that big packet at the beginning of the year,
Oh,
and you
right.
admitted to being a parent who gets
Who just-
overwhelmed.
Yeah, I am one of those.
You know what, I'm gonna lend you a book. You gave me this.
So you want me to show you how I filed this
Organized
one?
and it doesn't just, it's not just for students.
Well, I was thinking with the beautiful brochure that Sharza did, telling
Yeah.
parents they can prepay that might be helpful, but just an aside.
We could maybe draw attention to it a little bit better.
On 52, I think it's good policy, but I was just concerned about the district shall not spend more than the actual debt owed in efforts to recover unpaid meal charges. I don't know how we go about that process, but if we're like mailing out to everybody who hasn't paid and somebody has a dollar negative balance, then we broke our policy, right? So I just didn't know how we did that, and I wanted to make sure we weren't violating our
I think the
policy.
first round is you get a note home, yeah? That there's some form and.
I recall mailings going home, but
There are mailings as well.
There
Yeah.
are mailings as well, but I remember sometimes getting I overdrew my account.
But do you does it have to be over a certain amount, like over $10, or if you owe 27 cents?
We would not send it out for 27 cents.
Yeah, so that's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to say it's a $5 minimum. I believe I've heard that from Julie, but I can't say with certainty, so I will check and I'll get back to you.
I just don't want us to stupidly break a policy that we never had to have in the first place. Yeah.
Okay, 66 through 100?
Okay.
I have something on 67.
I have something on 60.
I have,
Well, you were supposed to say that when I said through page 65.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard the first number. I didn't pay attention to it.
60.
My attention
I
span
have
only
61.
lasted to
Did I
the
miss
first
the
number.
61?
Okay, 60 and 61. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and there's more of a discussion this later on board member emails, but I'm not sure exactly what this all means. So if you don't mind, could we clarify? And the other thing that strikes me about this is everything that I've read says it's optional. So, in terms of policy. But I'm not trying to hide anything, but if I want to delete an email, then I think I should be able to delete an email.
It says you
know.
can't delete an email?
Board
well,
members'
going-
personal account or
yeah.
device shall be saved.
Going forward, I mean, I think going forward, you'd be required, anything that you did in your official capacity as a school board member would have to be, potentially sent to a CC or something that's district-wide, that it's district property, because otherwise, yeah, you're obligated to maintain a record on district servers, right?
Well, the question is on our personal email. So I have no problem with us keeping, I mean, nearly all of what I do has Andy or somebody in CC. So that's not the issue for me. The issue is I believe that this requires that we maintain our own, all the emails that are created, saved, or sent on our personal account or device, that we save those ourselves.
No, it says shall be saved as an electronic file to a district-provided account or device.
So that's why, yeah.
Going forward, obviously, it's not our current policy, so.
But do we have to transfer, or is CC sufficient?
Not retroactive.
Well, by
So-
CCing, it's on the district, oh, go ahead, sorry.
So the policy, again, I think it's well stated that this is going forward, so there isn't anything that you have to do going back. But the statement is either to use your district provided email address, which I know that many of you don't realize that you actually do have a district provided email address because it just automatically forwards to your preferred email address. But we do provide you a district email, and so the policy is that either you would use a district email, which then will automatically save onto our server and we'll have the records, or that you CC that district email, because the challenge is that even if you were to CC Cheryl, myself, Kathy, or someone else, if we ever had a public record request, the ability for us to ask every person within the district to go through your own files and see when Thane may have, or a board member may have emailed is just a rather challenging and cumbersome process. And so that's why they're really saying that, if there was a public record request related to any communication that you'd had in pursuit of district business, that they'd want to, the easier way would be having it
Right.
come directly from your device. And so that's why they're saying instead of having the intrusive process of your own email account access, that you would have it on the district email.
So David, let me ask you a question. So in terms of the deleting, so let's say, you know, I write an email to Teresa saying, thank you for speaking it last night. It was really nice hearing from you. And then she writes back, you know, it was so fun, blah, blah, blah. And I just delete that, right? So they're not sent, because I like to keep anything that's in my inbox is just what I haven't dealt with.
Absolutely.
I don't have like 3,000 things in my email.
I'm very similar. I archive everything, I don't delete, so that may be my suggestion there. And if we were to set you up on your personal devices with that extra account, I can show you it's only one screen away. You know, you'll open up your email the same, and you'll just select your account from, you know, personal or work or district account. And that way you could clean it up and archive it all, but it never actually gets deleted.
Oh, is that the not inboxing? But that's only Gmail. I use Yahoo.
Right, exactly. So if we were to swap you over to the district side, right now, currently everything is like an email that goes to you from us, goes through your district account, and then is forwarded. But when it comes back, it's not, unless you CC it, there's a gap. We don't see that reply. So to, like Andy said, to rebuild the structure of a conversation would be painstaking, I would say.
Interestingly, reading the preamble, it looks like it's based on a California Supreme Court decision, which had said that all communications relating to the official capacity of the elected official are indeed subject to FOIA, but you shouldn't be subject to overly intrusive searches. So it was the court that suggested, hey, keep a copy of everything official on in an official place, and therefore when someone sends in the FOIA request, the school district in good faith can say, we have this policy and we will give you that which we find on our servers. But you aren't going into things laptop. You're not going to go into things, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think we just need clarity on exactly what it is we're going to do and make sure the policy conforms to what we're going to do.
Though I do feel like as a board, most of us have established emails that are strictly.
I don't. I use Gmail.
I use my, well, yeah, I use both my accounts. Yeah. But I don't
mine's
have
a straightakever@gmail.com.
What is, help me understand the ability to request information, because we sometimes get confidential emails, and what is can anybody request this information? I don't know the legalities there.
So overall, anyone can request information. However, the responding agency or the school district also has certain rights with respect to like confidential information about an employee, for example, things that we would do off the record. Certainly we also have attorney-client privilege, which is anything Andy ever says. We can't do that, but certainly anything our counsel says to us. So yeah, so we do, because in my practice we go out to agencies all the time with FOIA requests, and they'll come back and say we've reviewed everything and we don't have anything that's not privileged. So sorry, but generally speaking, yeah, anyone can ask for it, and we're obligated to make a good faith effort to respond.
So anytime I write to Andy and say, okay, Kevin is driving me crazy, could you move him to the other side of the room? Somebody else could get.
Guess what? I'm setting up FOIA as soon as I get home.
Just wanted to make sure.
So this is a first reading. I certainly am hearing that, understandably so, we want to get some very clear guidance as to, one, what is truly legal best practice, and whatever that best practice is, let's have a very clear recommendation to you guys. If you want to know the full flexibility that you might have, then we'll also have that prepared. But I'll make sure before you guys have this for a vote in November that you'll understand exactly what the policy is.
Andy and David, that like so next year there's an election, say there's a newly elected person, when they're sworn in, they also need to be told, and here's your account, you should, from here on forward, you should be using this email for all business.
Why would there be a new person?
I don't
I mean, I have to be totally candid. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm so, because I do law work and stuff, I pretty much assume anything I write could be eventually
I do
disclosed
too.
to somebody, so.
I do too. But it's easier to have it all in one spot.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna do that going forward, certainly
And
with
it's
this
nice
thing.
to have that reminder
Yeah.
that this is public.
Yeah.
I mean, I act the same way, but still.
So you'll never find an insult on mine. Just so you know. Okay, and somebody, you had 61.
I've been taking all of those things as insults. That's good.
I have 61.
Okay.
And this goes to an issue that I want to bring to a head somehow. I'm not sure how to do it, but this whole, hopefully not a Pandora's box, but about extracurriculars, athletics, grading. I don't know if we violated this already. I don't know if it says it's similar to a prior rule. Non-certificated coaches have no authority to assign grades. We grade people in sports at Nordoff.
So the way that we're technically compliant, although I will not dispute that we maybe are not with the spirit of it, is actually the classified or walk-on coaches are not the ones providing the grade, it's the athletic director.
And then the next question is, well, in these policies there are, or actually in other policies that I've looked at, I don't want to conflate them, but are policies about grading, for example, PE, which clearly take into account that, yeah, he won't mind me saying so, Matt Wilson, the coach of the soccer team, the girls soccer team, sent me a long email, which I forwarded on to Andy and Cheryl. And you know, he's really frustrated about this whole grading thing, and he pointed out his son was on the soccer team and was a medium player. He got a B. He gets a B because he's not a star player. It's just
wow.
It's completely absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Is that the reason? Do you know? I mean, because
it's
my
like
understanding was that the grade was based on attendance and showing up for practices.
But where is it? You know, there are provisions in the code for grading physical education that are essentially like that. They talk about setting personal goals and then your attempt to meet those goals. But I mean, it's just, what a free-for-all out there. You know, kids just,
And some kids, their GPA gets hammered, they can't get into a school because they didn't score a soccer goal.
Right.
I would like to bring this up at a future meeting. I think it is a policy that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I don't even know where the policy is. Where is it?
No, it's a Nordoff policy.
Yeah, I don't think.
But I mean, it must be a policy somewhere in our board policies, right? I mean, they can't just be doing this on their own.
There are school-specific.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually in board policy, but we will have it on a future agenda.
Soon.
And that, it wouldn't just be sports, it would also be, right, music and dance, and
Musical
you're in the
gets
musical.
graded,
and-
Well,
Yeah.
here's I mean, we're talking about policies, so I mean, some of these relate to actually, because one of the things is extracurriculars in here. The current policy 6145, which we have some changes in here, says that extracurricular activities are not part of the regular school curriculum, are not graded. This is our policy. Do not offer credit, do not take place during classroom time, and have all the following characteristics. That's in our policy, but we're not following that. Next.
67 is what I have. And this goes back to the non-certificated coaching things, and I mention this every year. I mean, I am thrilled at the level of volunteer that we have in this district, and it's obviously there's sports we could not have if we didn't have these volunteers. So I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize parents option to volunteer, but I don't know how we get around this this training. Every employee or volunteer high school athletic team coach shall complete at his or her own expense a coaching education program that meets the standards developed by the CIF. including but not limited to training in sports psychology, sports pedagogy, sports physiology, sports management, statewide, and school regulations and CPR. I know they all do the CPR and first aid training, but this other stuff is.
I do believe there is a coaching module that they have to take. Which
There certainly
covers-
is. This is a new policy, so I don't know if it does meet every one of these, including the sport psychology or physiology, those areas. But there are a number of requirements of modules they're taking. But we'll
they
figure
watch them online.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
We'll figure out if this is actually fully compliant with what we're currently doing.
You know, the interesting thing here is it's in the box, it says districts that wish to set their own standards, instead of the ones by CEF could modify it. But I'm wondering if you have to use the CEF standards if you're participating in CIF activities.
Where's that?
I don't know.
In the box, the last
sentence in the box.
We'll get more information on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe we could modify it and take those words out.
Mm-hmm.
And does that mean just the head coach? Or the assistant coaches? have
No,
to
it
meet
says
those requirements?
each.
Each coach.
And currently, all coaches, any walk-on assistant, the D-line coach or whatever position coach there might be, every single person that's going out there is required to go through, these requirements, including the training modules.
I have something on 86. Does anyone have anything before that?
85.
85?
84. I have an extra page. So I was very interested in looking at the gender nonconforming policy. I've been curious as to what our policy was, and I'm really happy to see the language in here. And I happened to do a little research on it and was wondering if there, I looked at outside organizations on LGBTQ school board policies, and our wording is spot on, except for there's one piece that's just not even there, that I'm wondering if we can look at to put in there, and it has to do with training and professional development on the issue. So I printed this out. I found suggested school board language that says the district shall conduct training for all staff members on their responsibilities under applicable laws and this policy, including teachers, administrators, counselors, social workers, and health staff. Information regarding this policy shall be incorporated into training for new school employees. To the extent funding is available, the district shall implement ongoing professional development to build the skills of all staff members to prevent, identify, and respond to bullying, harassment, and discrimination. The content of such professional development shall include, but not be limited to, terms, concepts, and current development understandings of gender identity, gender expression, and gender diversity in children and adolescents. Developmentally appropriate strategies for communication with students and parents about issues related to gender identity and gender expression that protect student privacy. Developmentally appropriate strategies for preventing and intervening in bullying incidents, including cyberbullying, classroom management practices, curriculum, and resources that educators can integrate into their classrooms to help foster a more gender-inclusive environment for all students, and school and district policies regarding bullying, harassment, discrimination, and suicide prevention and responsibilities of staff. One of the statistics I found is that 10.3% of all California public middle school and high school students identify as LGBTQ. And so if 10% of our population is identifying that way, it stands that we make sure all the protections are there. So.
I feel like I've heard and read stuff that we.
Yeah, I think the issue here is that we have like 1 billion policies, and the crux of our transgender policies, at least, are somewhere else.
Right. But I'm confident we don't have that policy anywhere. I'm very confident because we don't provide that level of training and support on those specific issues to all staff, which is what that's saying.
I'm just saying I think the right place for that is where we have all those other policies. Because a tiny part of that is about harassment, but most of that is about training and how we,
Right.
yeah. So, I think we should find where we have the other policies
And see what it
and
says
see how
and
that would
compare.
fit, yeah.
We can do that. Michelle, can you email that to me?
I have 86.
Do you mind, I missed 171?
Mhm.
This is the, an issue that was pointed out earlier. The action on a contract during open session of a regularly scheduled board meeting, and the action shall be reflected in the board's minutes. Prior to taking action, the board shall orally report a summary of the recommendation for the final action on salary or compensation in the form of fringe benefits. So I guess I just don't remember enough about how we do this. Without this, we would just say we're approving the deal, and that would be that. We wouldn't talk about what the deal was.
So there might be discussion, but in fact, because I knew this law had passed, this earlier this year, that I didn't wait for the board policy to come through. If you recall, actually, with Cheryl as well as with Hank during his the salary enhancement you offered him, we did actually have to walk through and verbally state what the terms were, what the salary was, and what the cost of the additional benefits were. And so our prior practice was not to necessarily state each of those details unless just in an organic conversation, as you guys were talking about various components, you might bring up salary, but you wouldn't have necessarily brought up the full cost of the STRS or PERS rate and the health and welfare and the term of the agreement. But we have done that this year.
Yeah, I think you even added it at the discussion last year for the 4% rate. Wasn't it on there? I remember seeing it and going, "Oh, this is great to know."
Are you saying with Hank?
No,
With
with
the
the certificated. Or maybe it was just part of the budget.
Yeah, I think that might have been.
In May.
Yeah, so this policy is as it relates to administrator contracts, and so we certainly have done it, in 2017 with the two contracts that we've executed.
Well, that's it. Well, that's what you're pointing out, that we've been doing it.
Mhm.
Good, well done. Before this was implemented, because I was trying to figure out what's different.
Mhm.
Like,
Right. Yeah. There's nothing different from
it
what
seemed
we've
like
done.
an elephant in the room. I mean, I would have liked to be there in the old days when it's like, okay, we're doing it. We are yes on the thing.
But the big change is we can't talk about the actual number for the superintendent, right, except in public.
Right.
We can for everybody else, but not the superintendent.
We can't make that vote in private. We have
We
to.
can't even discuss it.
Yeah, all the discussions on the superintendent's salary have to be done publicly. Which is kind of weird, but.
Which is also in part why, if you recall, at least for my salary, we won't call it a negotiation because it was an offer and an acceptance, but the terms, I never actually spoke to you, any of you directly about my salary back in August of last year. It was, or June of last year. It was actually a direct conversation with Tony, our attorney, because it would not have been appropriate for me to have had those conversations directly with you guys. But I think there still is an update even from what we may have done there.
That's all I have.
On page 86, that last line is crossed out by John, I assume. I'm actually agree with it. I'm okay to omit it, but was there any discussion as to why parents and guardians shall be informed of the type of science library activities that will be conducted and encouraged to sign consent forms? I imagine that would be a nightmare, but.
That sounds like,
Yeah,
logistically.
so we certainly try to keep our parents and guardians informed, but to actually require the consent forms and the tracking of every one of those, that's not a requirement, and it's a hurdle that could keep kids from being able to participate in otherwise very worthy activities.
Exactly.
So
Anything else before page 100? Okay, 100 to the end.
Yeah, just thinking more, I do, just thinking about this issue with the science, the lawyer in me wonders if we should do something in between, like for any kid who's participating in a, and maybe we already do it, in a class with laboratory work, that we do it. So we just send out a notice to the parents, hey, there's gonna be laboratory work, you know, it's gonna involve chemicals and things like that. Not opting in or opting out, just a notice that that's
Notice.
that they're gonna be part of that.
Fires, sharp things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I have something on 89. Again, more about extracurriculars and stuff. I just noted, and I agree with completely, the first at the top, the governing board recognizes that extracurricular and co-curricular activities enrich the education and social development of students and enhance students' feelings of connectedness with the schools. I really fully agree with that. So just wanted to point that out. And then, you know, the new one seems to be sort of limiting the barriers you put up between the kids' participation and requirements, says the prerequisites are limited.
This is page 104, just a note to self. At the end of the school year, each school must post on the school website, David, total enrollment of the school classified by gender. Do we do all this on the website?
Is it posted yet? I know we talked about it.
Each school?
Each
Well,
school.
it's the schools that offer athletic programs, so it's Nordhoff and
I'm
Matilla.
sorry, it
Yeah.
is about athletic competition, yeah.
I have talked to them about doing it. I have not physically
We're-
checked the website.
We're aware of the.
Well, I don't mean, it would be the end of this year,
Mhm.
because this is a new policy.
They
Doesn't
are
it?
aware that they need to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's been something that we've talked to both Matilla and Nordhoff with, or about.
And then on page 106, also new policies. A middle school or high school football team shall not hold a full contact practice during the off-season and shall not conduct more than 2 full contact practices per week. That needs to be reiterated to Lance. And then the last paragraph, I wrote the question, do we do this? The superintendent shall distribute California CIF information, yeah, I mean, I'm just, again, it says we should, do we?
Yeah, which is the one?
Hand out information to parents on cardiac arrest.
Certainly, I know it's in the coaches packet. I'll confirm whether or not it's actually getting into the hands of students.
Yeah, I mean, you've been here, Andy, when you were in this assistant superintendent's chair. I mean, that's always a big deal, I think, for all of us on the board when we have these policies. You know, obviously, either each of them becomes a potential hazard to the district if it's a policy and we don't follow it.
Absolutely.
So we have to make sure. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of stuff to keep
track of.
We do concussions, the previous one. I
Right.
think this is a new one. At least it's not in the
I don't
parents'
remember seeing
rights
it before.
handbook. It may be happening at the coach level, but it will now be in the parents' rights handbook also.
Well, and then to add to that, on page 109, students and parents must now sign a statement that the student will not use steroids.
while in the US, I hope.
Unless prescribed.
Wow.
Right, you're right, you might have a rash that requires a steroid, but. Page 110, this whole thing on work-based learning, do we have work-based learning?
I'm gonna toss that one over to
Yeah,
Sarah.
that was a
This
good
one she
question
worked
that
on.
we had to do a little bit of research on. Not to the extent of what it could be,
It sounds like.
but certainly, for example, when our students, we have students that are high school students that go work in an elementary classroom for 1 or 2 periods of their day, that would fall in this category of work-based experience. So yes, we do in some aspect offer it, and we have offered it. Like I know when I was a student at Nordhoff, 2 of my periods were, I worked at Ojai Valley Bank, and they counted for credits for 2 periods. Had to turn in work logs and things like that. So it has happened in the past more robustly. Now it's not happening so much so, but there still are some courses or activities that kids are doing that would fall under these categories.
seems
all I
just
have.
is mostly oriented towards permissiveness, right? To allow us to do things as opposed to promising to do things.
Exactly.
But if we do it, then there are requirements that we impose.
Right.
Anyone else, anything else?
132, because I'm sensitive about emails. I haven't noticed on any of our emails this kind of disclaimer language that we need to make clear that our response does not necessarily reflect the views of the board as a whole. It says it's an optional policy. I don't know if we need to do it, but if we do decide to do it, then I think we should have some standard language that we all use.
Wow, I gotta change, because I actually have a little thing at the bottom of mine that says, I can pretty much guarantee this is how it goes.
No, I often tell people that, you
I know how this
just-
works. No, I tell people that, but it's not on the email.
Yeah.
So you want a little.
Well,
subscript-
that's what it says. The policy says we have to have it.
Well, maybe to the extent that we're.
But we don't have to have the policy. But we could.
Well, it says shall make every, well, I mean, yeah, I guess, David, maybe if we all migrate over to using the district web or email, they can have a little script at the bottom saying,
The views just.
the views of any given school board member in response to a community, inquiry are those of the board member.
And I'm fine with that, and I'm fine with deleting the sentence, but we need to do one or the other.
Which is the sentence you're talking
And
about?
should make clear that his.
NWOK in the middle of that paragraph. Board member may respond as appropriate to an electronic communication received from a member, and should make clear that his response does not necessarily reflect.
Right, but I'm saying if it's in our script, then we're not doing this. If our email just generically has some reference at the bottom to these are my views only.
Right.
That's compliant with this.
Totally agree. But if we don't do that, then we need to get rid of the sentence.
Ah, got it. Okay. Sorry. It's getting late.
Sorry, which page?
132.
Yeah, 132.
The middle of the new wording, okay. The Ewoks.
Which may or may not be okay.
All right. Do you want to provide guidance to us? Because we can go. Lane's absolutely
like
correct.
that
This is
idea
an
of just having
optional. This is an optional policy, but I think there is an easy solution. Do you?
I would not adopt the policy. It's never been an issue, I think, certainly with my communication, and I just don't know why, I guess I have to say, even though I'm the guy with the script at the bottom of my emails, that, I don't represent you until it's in writing, but, just like, I don't know, it's kind of my feeling of society lately is like there's always some, thing at the bottom disclaiming, and I don't, nobody's can legally hold us accountable for having an opinion and being willing to engage somebody as an individual board member. And I've never encountered anyone who somehow felt like that I was speaking on behalf of the board when I'm clearly speaking on behalf of myself. And I just feel like it's just another policy that we have to worry about. We shouldn't have it. So
I'm fine.
I agree.
to agree.
If I may, I was just listening last night that Prop 65, their concern is going to require Starbucks to actually have posted every single cup of coffee that there is an ingredient in coffee that may be carcinogenic. And so now every coffee shop in California, as more 10 employees, may have to warn us that drinking coffee has.
I love the ones that say, this is hot.
Yeah, right.
They have to have that on.
Right, exactly.
McDonald's.
Yeah.
So we're removing the sentence or the entire paragraph?
Entire thing.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, because it begs the question to me, do I then need to respond to every person who sends me an email as a board member through I guess I should be asking this question, if I receive a personal email, but about a school district question, then do I have to reply using my school district email and disclaim everything? Like, Do I have,
I
can
think
I
you
just
have
respond to
discretion.
somebody?
I think you have discretion to effectively say, hey, you know, you're my friend and I'll tell you, you know, what I think without feeling like it's an official
It doesn't need to be an
board.
official school board record?
I think that's what the Supreme Court, from what I read in this very brief description, is really trying to provide us, which is to say, when you're doing something formally in the school district, do it with that CC or do it through your district email, and therefore you've got this separation, and no one's going to be going through your private email. I mean, the court said that's too intrusive, but you have to play ball. In other words, if all of your stuff is only on your own email, then they've got to go through your stuff because it's nowhere else. But if you making the decision which goes on the official and which stays on your personal, then they're going to accept that.
So Shirley, I was telling Andy, I have a special email that I've been using for board stuff. I created one that's separate from my personal. But there are people out in the community who know my personal email.
Right.
So they'll write to me on my personal email. I will forward it to my school board one and answer them from there. Just because I don't want to be if I want to look something up, or who was it that asked me that, or what did I tell so-and-so? I know if it's school board related, it's in that email. It's not in my personal one.
See, and I have, because I have had interactions with the school board before being a board member, I already had a school board archive filing system going of, different issues that have come up that I've continued to use.
Can you move a folder, David?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah.
Migrate.
Okay. Maybe that's what I need to do.
Time for some voting?
No, 7.5.3 superintendent's report.
Oh.
Sorry, not just yet.
I knew we couldn't start until 7:30, so I was stalling, and now, yeah.
All right, so I do have two topics I want to, a little bit more formal in my normal statement would be during this period. One is what I believe to be really exciting news, which is that we have finished our Feed Our Kids, Fund Our Schools initiative, the free and reduced meal application, informational item for the start of the school year. Last year we had 1,077 students on the meal program. And so I'm not actually even sure how to word this, because the reality is the fact that we have an increase may mean that we actually have more need in this community, which of course is very unfortunate. But it is still good news from a district perspective as far as the initiative, because we are now serving more kiddos. So the number went from 1,077 last year up to 1,153. So as far as a raw number, that's a 76 student increase. But the fact that we also declined in enrollment by by about 30 kiddos, you would have actually anticipated us to have dropped by about 10 from last year. So absolute numbers, we increased by 76. On a relative basis of where we were projected to have been this year, it's about a 90 student increase, which, as we talked about, roughly $1,400 or so per kiddo, means that this initiative did bring over $125,000 of new money to the district. So I am very proud of that. That really credit goes to Tiarza and Julie with support from Food for Thought to be able to both create the initial brochure, but also really create the strategy and the program of getting to each site, and the appropriate way of highlighting the many different benefits that go beyond the fact that you can get a really quality meal in the kitchen. So just want to share that with you guys. I think that is a great it was a great introduction as far as Tiarza's role for the district and the way that the district can increase communication going out to families.
And that though doesn't hit until next budget year, right?
That's right. That's right.
Because the next budget year is based on this year.
Exactly. That's
and
exactly
can we use some of that?
Next fiscal year, I think.
Right.
That idea of what we shared and getting to sort of trying to get more people to buy lunch. Right? I mean, right now we're putting, $90,000 a year into the cafeteria fund?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a way that we can, start our next initiative is to
well, we
encourage...
certainly, for those who saw Julie's or Tiarza's presentation, I think that they did a nice job of not just highlighting the benefits of signing up for the meal program, but also, the brochure itself, which again, Food for Thought was a generous donor on as well and supporter. Really does highlight things like 70% of our produce are coming from 150 miles or closer. They're local produce, or the from scratch cooking that we have at certain sites, including fresh rolls every day at Nordhoff and those areas that we're really being highlighted to, help people see that, there's many benefits to this program, but one is also just to highlight the nutrition service program in our district. So
It'll be interesting to
it's
see
definitely going to be interesting. I will be working with Patty and Julie on trying to get, numbers earlier in the year, because it's always challenging with nutrition to get, current numbers on the number of meals being served and revenue. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that to see if this fall, if we see a spike because of the increased campaign.
Yeah, it would also be interesting to see if it's sustained or if it is just a spike.
Right.
And if it is just a spike, maybe we need to do some more long-term campaign.
Right, as well as look within and figure out, are we, we're getting people to come to our restaurant and then we don't have repeat customers. Maybe there's something that we can continue to improve on, that we're not meeting the needs of our customers. Let's view this nutrition service program as, it's providing a very important service, but ultimately, we're especially at Nordhoff, where kids can walk off and go to Ojai, Frosty, or other places. We're competing with them, and so let's really try to have a quality product that meets the financial needs of the district, but also is just a nutritious and yummy meal. So I do think that can go on the record, as far as I don't believe Hank ever used the word yummy in a superintendent report. So that was the first thing I was really excited to be able to share. The second thing, there are kind of similar to this two-edged sword, where there's some positives I want to report, but also some things that I certainly see areas we can improve, and the underlying issues are certainly ones of concern. And so since our last meeting, we had 2 events that have garnered media coverage or attention in our community. In fact, actually, I made a quick list of, I had interviews in October with NPR, the ABC affiliate in Santa Barbara, the NBC affiliate in LA, and of course our great local papers, OBN and The Star, related to the tree incident at Topa on September 25th, as well as the incident at the football game on September 29th. And so 2 certainly unfortunate events, and I will state again what we of course are all thinking, which is our thoughts continue to be with the kiddos and staff who were injured, and even those who were not physically injured, but those who were impacted by the scene of what happened at Topa on the 25th, as well as for those students who were impacted at the football game. And so my point in bringing those up here is actually to really try to, again, highlight what I see as some real positive that we can take from those events, but also to admit some areas that we see for potential improvement. As far as the positive, and this is something that I cannot overstate, is truly the pride I have in both our staff as well as in the students and the way they handled both of these situations. I hesitate with the tree incident to name a single staff member, because I do think there were so many people who just did a tremendous job, but nonetheless, I am going to mention a few names, and again, please, for you guys as well as anyone perhaps watching at home, know that this is a non-exhaustive list. There were many people who really just were tremendous, but I do want to say specifically Alex Mejia and Sarah Ferrante, 2 of our teachers who really were just incredible in the way that they supported the kiddos who were injured, helping coordinate also with families, with the students who were left, really concerned about, their friends who were injured, and just did such a great job supporting our staff member Hurt as well. Don Damianos, of course, being a principal for 7 years, but this was a new site for her this year, and so the fact that within a few weeks of her starting at this new site, having such a significant event, I think showed tremendous leadership, and really was someone who was able to provide logistical and coordination support, as well as then moral support for her team. Rachel Hansen, the part-time office manager, our full-time office manager, actually was out during that day, and so Rachel, who's just tremendous, was working, more often than she typically does, but did just a tremendous job on the phones. As you can imagine, we had literally, tens of calls, if not 100 calls that came in that afternoon, and Rachel really, again, helped coordinate both the calls as well as with the coordination of folks that were coming into the building. I'm saying this truly not because of who's sitting to my left, but we also had incredible parent volunteers, and I would say that Osla Ruff was certainly a leader among the parents who I was blown away that I'm not even sure if she actually was planning on volunteering that day or if she truly came because of the what she heard. But Osla came within 15 minutes or so of when I was there, and just next thing I do is look over and see her. She's on the phone, sitting down at a desk and handling parent calls, and just was incredible as well. So we had, our staff, we had our administration, we had parent volunteers, all really came together. And then we had just incredible district office and SPED support. We had, as I talked about, our psychologist, our mental health clinician, Rebecca Kirkland, our director, and so many others who immediately came out to provide support as well. So I think the staff did incredibly well. I'm incredibly proud of second and third and fifth and sixth grade students who were exposed to such a traumatic event, who just did such a good job as well responding and listening to the teachers as they were trying to help coordinate and bring them back into the classrooms, and the support that we were able to try to provide. But really what you saw in those classrooms were, of course, kiddos being resilient and supporting one another. So very proud of the way that just the entire campus handled that event. However, I do think that there are lessons certainly in that we can learn from how it's handled. And I really think actually, for the good and the bad, that this is something that actually goes to me directly, which is I think that our district administration needs to have a more defined understanding of the way that we're going to get communication out to families. And that was really where I think there was lacking. We actually, it was Cheryl who, one of her first things when she walked in to TOPA that day was to start sitting down and worked with Dawn on drafting a message that went out via text to the TOPA families. But frankly, we were slow in getting communication to the rest of the families, and there are many staff members across our district who have families or loved ones who are at that site. And there were parents who were calling to other sites, and frankly, I wasn't thinking about a concerned parent who might be calling Myers Oaks, but just wanted to get an idea of what might be happening across the valley. And so we communicated with our leadership team, but we did not communicate with the entire staff or with parents nearly quick enough. And so I think that's something that we certainly are taking away from this is coordinated communication, multiple channels. One thing we certainly saw was that Facebook at times, and I think that you guys have even shared this with me, that Facebook was getting out some more reliable information or quicker information at times than the district was. And so another initiative that we have is we are going to start a district Facebook page and try to have some social media presence where we have an official way that people can get information if that's the channel that they pursue information. But of course, we already have a great infrastructure in place with the texting and with the Blackboard Connect, the automated voice message that goes out. And so I think that we definitely in the future would like to leverage that better to really get the word out to families. So I think that, again, Rebecca Kirkland, our special ed director, and others did the best that they could as well when it came to giving communication or communicating with the parents who started to arrive on campus, because we have a number of parents who immediately started to arrive to ensure the safety of their own child as well as the friends in the school. And I think that they did tremendous, but again, we could have given a little more direction, and we just haven't. Those are the sorts of things you don't necessarily plan on, is who's going to be the lead spokesperson at the front of the school, start talking with parents while Cheryl's working with the staff and I'm working with the media and the first responders and those areas. So I think that the experience definitely opened our eyes to just a little bit more logistical coordination that really focused around communication, getting the word out to families. I do want to thank Cheryl for the message she did get out, though, because I know that TOPA families were quite concerned if their kids could have been one of the children who were injured, and we did have that text that went out from Cheryl and Dawn within a half hour or so, 45 minutes of when the events happened, letting them know if you have not heard from us at this point, then you can rest assured that your child was not one of the children who were injured. And so I think
Which was a really smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I only have so many characters on it, so I had to find a way.
But I mean, you can imagine sending something saying there's been an incident, everything's under control, and leaving the major question, so that was just smart.
And of course, that was one of the things that caused a bit of a delay, is the last thing we want to do is send out that communication before we've actually been able to get in touch with each of the families. And so that certainly impacted things. But once that communication went out, I think that, which again, Cheryl and Dawn deserve the credit for that, I think we could have done more to get the word out and to provide a few updates along the way. So that's my reflection on the incident TOPA, though. Again, I don't want to have what I just spent a few minutes talking about how we can improve be the final statement. So I'll just once again say how proud I am of our staff as well as the students who respond to that. As far as the incident at the football game, very unfortunate incident. we, of course, have public events, and so there are times that it is challenging to, fully control who might come onto our campus. In this case, there was nothing to suspect that a person had inappropriate intentions or motivations. And so really the credit here goes to the brave students who were both vigilant and keeping an eye on, what was going on around them. I can just think back to when I was in high school, and the last thing I was necessarily doing when I was hanging out with my high school friends was, paying any attention to much else. And so the fact that these students were paying attention, and, of course, what we always say is if you, see something, say something, and if you just don't feel right about something, then it's really time to, communicate and share that concern with an adult. And so, when the students came forward with the allegation, it really was, I think, more than anything, a gut feeling of this just doesn't quite seem right. And so they deserve, tremendous credit, although, of course, they'll remain confidential in who they were individually. But really, did the right thing and helped administration be able to step in. And so as soon as Dave Munson received the allegation or the concern from the students, immediately stepped in to handle the situation, and then it was really a great partnership, cooperation with the police department and being able to try to exit this gentleman from the main area of the field, be able to talk to him more, and then ultimately, it was Dave and in the high school administration working with the police department throughout the following week to help with the investigation that ultimately led to an arrest on October 6th. So that one, I don't actually have any reflection on how we could have done things better. I think that the students and the high school administration handled that extremely well, and I have every reason to have confidence that this community is made up of tremendous people, and that is not a common occurrence that we have someone who may have inappropriate intentions when they're coming onto our campus. I think that we very lucky that, to my knowledge, we've not had a similar allegation in the past, and we really have just tremendous community support at each of these events. So it's not something that we're feeling requires a knee-jerk reaction to try to have a different level of review or oversight of who might be coming onto our facility. But certainly, it's encouraging all of us to really be mindful of who is at our activities when they're open to the public. So those are my reflections as well as my accolades I'd like to provide to those who have been involved in those two events.
Ask a couple of questions?
Sure thing.
Has anything happened at Nordhoff without mentioning who the people are who came forward to say thank you so much for bringing our attention to this and to the general population of, this is how you handle a situation like this, and we're so happy that our Nordhoff students have done that? Because I had to have that conversation because my own daughter came home and said, so you know what happened at the football game? Yeah. And I didn't know until the next day that somebody had reported it.
Right.
And that there was anything that could be done. So I had to have the conversation with my kid, so you say something.
Exactly.
So I'm just wondering if that conversation has happened at Nordhoff. And I'm also wondering if I remember correctly, that he's no longer allowed on campus?
That's correct.
And so do staff that are taking tickets at the football games know who this is and have been alerted to, hey, this is the guy that's not allowed back on campus? Are we making that precaution?
Yeah, so again, the football game was on Friday the 29th. Monday the 2nd is when Cheryl actually put together a stay-away letter that was sent to both the gentleman in the allegation as well as to each of our office administrators, and Kathy assisted with that, sending out to all schools. So every school is in receipt of the actual official stay-away letter, as well as the gentleman has received it. Additionally, I sent out an email communication later in the week providing a little more information once we knew about the arrest, and in that communication in the picture went out to all staff. So all 300 staff who have work emails have received the picture and have been encouraged to remain vigilant in ensuring
Would
that
there be, I mean,
he's not
having,
returned.
like, so they got their email a week ago, but when you're selling tickets, is there a little
Can you
picture
put a
there?
wanted picture on the inside of the
right, because how are they gonna remember what that guy looks like, unless there's like a picture somewhere?
I will.
I don't know if that's legal.
Yeah, I'll look into the appropriateness or the legality of having the picture. Certainly, us, making sure that Dave or someone in the administration takes the ticket takers, aside for a moment before we open up and make sure that they review the picture and understand, again, a reminder of the importance of guarding. Again, not that we have any reason to suspect that he'll be returning. We certainly don't, but certainly I think the precaution's appropriate, and so we'll figure out the appropriate way to take the precaution.
And my other question is in regards to the TOPA incident. I heard a lot of parents go, wait, what text? You got a text? How do I get these texts? And I'm hoping that we can somehow make another concerted effort and make a concerted effort at the beginning of every year to get parents to sign up for those texts. I can't remember how we heard about it.
It goes out every year in the back to school packet, but we have them on hand. And what I've coached the TOPA office staff anyway is whenever anybody ever asks questions that did go out in those texts, to say, hey, did you know that went out in a text today? Did you know that you could sign up for that text? So to try to remind people that way as well. But yeah, that's the hard part, getting everybody to sign up for it.
You can send them a text to tell them about it.
Maybe at the down, or I'll actually even mention it to Oslo. I know they're having an event at TOPA on Friday. Maybe a little table set up just for anyone who happens to not
We've got these nice little flyers. We can hand them out at all kinds of events and places to remind people.
What's the event on Friday?
It's the Fall Festival.
The Fall Festival.
God, I've missed everything at TOPA this year. I'm out of town on Friday.
Tomorrow is Miners Oaks Fall Festival.
I think Miramani's is on Friday also. Is that possible?
I don't know. Maybe.
We'll get an email out to you guys.
TOPA, so
They did. You sent us an email.
They are all on the district calendar on the homepage. I think it's, it might be Miners Oaks.
We'll send out a reminder of
Miners
just
Oaks,
those events.
Friday also?
The one thing I heard, also, needless to say, Andy, everything I heard was that you handled yourself fabulously as well. You should get some kudos too.
Thank you.
For all these events, including the other event, which we didn't talk about with the flutes. But I did hear that there were some parents, notwithstanding all the efforts to talk to them, who just insisted that they had to get their kid off of campus, and that's disappointing. You just wonder if there's something. It's really disappointing because it's such a selfish act, and it's so fruitless. It's what does it have to do with anything? Your kid's fine in a classroom, and we're trying to get a helicopter onto campus to take some kid off to Medevac out to Paso Robles or to Los Robles or wherever, and some parent has to go and get their kid, which apparently they were allowed to do, right? I guess we can't stop
We had
them.
a couple of circumstances, yeah.
There were also a few that we closed off access from the front gate and they came on from back gate or side gate and did create disruption that was challenging for the remaining students in the room as the parent was not assisting.
I probably just that you have to be sensitive to people's sometimes irrational responses to perceived threats to their children.
Of course.
That said, it is tempting to consider sending some follow-up to those people. Because it really is, at times of crisis like that, once it's like the first couple people hop over the wall at the end of a football game. Most of the time football games, nobody comes down on the field, but every now and then something happens and, a big victory at the end and a few people make it here, a few people, and then it's just, forget it, and if you have that happen at a school, that could be chaos.
Yeah.
2 people get in and then they come out with their kid, well, you said I couldn't, I do wonder whether we should, at least we should think about whether there's some follow-up that should occur with those parents that we identified. It was unfortunate that you did that, and we really want to try and maintain order when there are dangerous events at our schools, and maybe you can confer with us for what we can do to make that, to prevent that from happening again,
Sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, items for future agendas. We've already discussed the extracurricular grade issue. I have 2 that I would like to bring up. One is, and I was talking to Andy about this today because we didn't have a student rep, or we knew our student rep was going to be different. But when I first came on, I did some research on, you know, what does a board do and what, you know, all these things. And one of the things I noticed that our district is doing a little different is the student rep. That they're just sort of sharing great things that are going on, which is wonderful, but they're not really representing any students. And I think the point of it is that they are a voice that we can turn to and ask, how are students feeling about this on campus? Or a voice that students can go to and say, you know, we're feeling like, you know, the library is really dangerous or whatever, you know, that there's just some voice that I mean, obviously, you know, Kevin and Shelley, you've got kids so there's probably kids on campus that are comfortable if they know you're a board member and I'm gonna go tell them, you know, but there's other students who don't have relationships with us as board members, and if they know, you know, Morgan Mays is their rep, they might feel comfortable in saying, letting her know.
Especially as we go through the board policies. I think it'd be really interesting to have a student's perspective on some things.
Yeah. I mean, Andy, when I asked him about it today, he said that, you know, they generally don't have a vote that sways the, you know, like if we're 3-2 and that person were to vote, so it's 3-3, it doesn't change, it doesn't make a locked vote. It's just a.
Are you asking them to stay for the whole meeting? Because that seems like a lot to ask a student.
I think maybe we could look at the agenda and say, okay, well, we're just looking at, you know, not board policies, but contracts and whatever. But if, you know, for the CTE stuff, that would have been very interesting to have a high school student here.
I think my opinion is that if we were going to have that model, then we'd have to change things also in the leadership department at Nordhoff, because the representative is not elected by the student body. They take a leadership class and then are kind of, who wants to do this job? And somebody raises their hand to do this job. I think that the idea that we have an elected representative for the students would be important at that point. I'm not sure why it is run the way it is. I don't know the history of the leadership.
So I would just like us to discuss it, what our options are in the future.
I think a voice would be great, but a vote might raise some problems.
We'll talk about it another time, not today.
Yeah, I think we should have that discussion though. I think it's good. Along those lines, you know, when I was running for office and an idealistic neophyte, I always thought it would be interesting if we were to sort of ride circuit, you know, like the old judges would, and go and have board meetings at the different schools periodically, which would still be a regular board meeting, but there would be a part of the meeting set aside for that school. And people, you know, kids, anybody from that school could speak to us about issues that they have, or, you know, hopefully things that they like, things that they, whatever. But, I mean, I like the idea of, and it should be, I mean, these are effectively adults at Nordhoff, to encourage them to engage us, you know, and not just be a potted plant who recites, you know, the bulletin, but to say, hey, you know, during the interim between now and the last meeting, here's one of the issues that people have raised with me, you guys should know about, you know.
Civic engagement a little bit, teaching civics at the high school. Okay, and then the other thing I would like to, and actually specifically next, in the November board meeting, is I wanted us to just talk about our rotation, our president, vice president, clerk. You know, this is, I was told when I came on by a couple of the retiring board members, this is the way they chose to do it, and we don't necessarily have to keep doing it that way. The reason I want to bring it up is I know Michael has some concerns about the time management of rotating through, and so I just thought we could, as a board, discuss, hey, we like this policy, and if we say, you know, I'd like to nominate Shelley, and she can say, I'm not interested, or I just think we should talk about it in terms of, just because it is a big time commitment to be president, and you know, how would we handle it if somebody doesn't want to just rotate through?
I appreciate you clarifying, because I was like, okay, great, now I'm about to be president, let's change it.
I think she's saying she'd like to keep doing it, and Kevin, you're out.
No, I just think we should, because in December we have to vote,
Right.
so we should discuss it before we get to December. It's like, what happens if somebody doesn't want to rotate, or how, I would have no idea. If, like, what if you said, I don't wanna be president, then what would we do in December? We would, so we just should know, we should discuss it.
It's like asking a robot to calculate pi, everyone just goes.
Now, consent calendar, we have to vote on it next, so I'm not
Correct.
even going to, am I adjourning this? I am adjourning this
You are
meeting.
adjourning, and then we will immediately open the.
Can we take 2 minutes?
Sure
for a
thing.
bathroom break?
Take us.
Okay, opening of the special meeting. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. Approval of the minutes from the October 3rd and September 5th, October 3rd, and October 5th meetings. A motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed.
That didn't include the one I wasn't at, right? Did you just?
You already abstained from that one.
Right.
You abstained last
Yeah.
time.
Thought you included more than just the one.
Well, this
the
also
city
included the
council.
city council
Oh,
and my closed session.
Yeah. Sorry.
7.1.1, Ohio Unified School District. Oh, I forgot to mention the closed session, Kathy, at the beginning. Do I
can
need
do
to
that.
re-say?
No, we did it at the.
That was as a courtesy. This is where it becomes
Okay.
actually
The vote, so
legally.
it gets recorded here. Got
Yeah,
it.
so 4-0, the motion by Shelley, seconded by Thane.
Right.
Sorry, now 7.1.1, Classified Personnel Commissioner Appointment Process. Do I have a motion to approve?
the process.
Oh, the process, yeah, sorry, I was looking for her name.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. 7.3.1, 2, and 3, anyone opposed to taking them all and was as one action?
No, that's a good idea.
Approving all 3 actions, do I have a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. 7.4.2, resolution with Climate Tech, making certain findings required, therefore authorize related actions. I'll move to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. The Ohio Unified School District's Internet Safety Policy action, to approve the we already held the public hearing, so it's just to approve the policy. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the policy, the
I'll
internet
second.
safety policy.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. The Suicide Prevention Board Policy, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, none opposed. The consent calendar. Any questions about the consent calendar?
You guys better approve it, cause my daughter is dying to go to see me.
Well, except for that. I'll move to approve.
Pocket veto.
Yeah.
I'll second.
I'm going to abstain. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3 ayes, 1 abstention. I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Yes?
Jane's pretty good.
Thank you.
Great job.